All right, we're going to call to order this meeting. This is Thursday, June 15th of the Planning and Transportation Commission. Let the record show that at the moment we have 6 of 7 commissioners with Commissioner McTighe not present. We suspect he may show up at some point soon. So this is the time where I give people a chance to talk if they have public comment on an item not on the agenda. And I don't see anyone rushing up and waving a green card, so I'm going to close that portion of public comment. And we're going to move to the consent calendar, which consists of the PTC minutes from the June 1st meeting. Let me ask a question of clarification. John, is this, you have something with yellow here?
Yes, we wanted to point out a change to the minutes that we received from the speaker at the last meeting, Emily Walter. She wanted to note that she wasn't confused, as was in the original set of minutes, but she just was seeking clarification on the waivers and incentives. So we corrected that. We agreed with her.
John, we're getting a lot of feedback on the mics. Do we have someone who can
Let me see what
that?
we can do about that.
Thank you.
So do any commissioners have any comments on the minutes? Yes.
Okay, I have a couple that maybe we should wait for John.
For John. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we've got the partial solution to the feedback. If you could take your mics and point them down a little bit. Apparently they're directed toward the speakers behind you, and that's where the feedback is coming in. So
Okay.
we'll try that and see if it helps out at all.
Okay. So now, John, we're going to give you some commission feedback on the minutes. Anita?
John, I had a couple things on the second page under my comments. And this is, I guess, partly also a question to you on how much specificity you want in these. In the first bullet point under my comments, the specific ask I had there was regarding the drawings for code-compliant buildings. And I don't know whether it makes sense to put that level of specificity in here.
That would make sense to us. to help-
Okay, and
help
then
clarify
I
that.
would, I like to say maybe just a comma there instead of the semicolon and said, including drawings for a code-compliant building before the application of the density bonus. And then in the fifth one, the specificity that what I recall Phoebe and I both saying is that we would like to avoid using concessions. So it's kind of specifically excluding concessions. And then I just have a question. These are actually in Commissioner Bodner's comments, and it's just a matter of whether we should specify zip cars or if we're going to specify a brand, if we should specify more than one, or if we have any issues with doing that kind of thing.
You know, I think the minutes accurately reflect what we were talking about, which were zip cars. And
Okay.
so after the fact, I learned more about zip cars and would probably change what I wrote. This minute
But you said
reflects
it at
what
that
we
point.
Okay.
discussed.
Any other comments on minutes? On page 4, it says Chair Meadows stated that she had no comments at this time on the mitigated negative declaration, and I believe that what I said was that I didn't actually see anything except generic issues that could affect any project, and that mitigation measures appeared to satisfactorily address those. At least that's what I recall thinking. Whether I stated it or not, I'm pretty sure that I did. Okay, no other comments on the minutes? Do I have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes as modified by the dais of Thursday, June 1st.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, and Commissioner McTighe absent. Okay, so we're going to move on to the public hearing, and let me just establish some ground rules right here at the beginning. So first of all cell phones and other electronic devices, including Nintendos and Game Boys, should be off. I know this is enthralling enough for you all. And also, when we get to the public comment section, there's going to be no cheering or booing anyone's comments. We're going to be respectful of what everybody has to say. So when we get to that part, let's just keep that in mind. So with that, we're going to address item number.
Ask people if they want it.
Yeah, and I have a stack of, so if you're going to speak during public comment, please make sure that we get your green speaker card, and I'll call you up when the time is appropriate. And I'll tell you more about that when we get there. But right now, we're going to open up the hearing on the 40 Main Street offices. And wait, actually, before that, we have a comment, right? Yes, Commissioner Bodnar. Thank you.
I've had the opportunity to review Mr. Packard's recent letter asking for my recusal, and I have consulted with staff and city's legal counsel.
We can't hear you back here.
I have consulted with staff and city's legal counsel, and once again, the conclusion among everyone is that there is no reason for me to recuse myself. And most importantly, it should be noted that I have not formed an opinion on the matter before us tonight, and I wait for the opportunity to hear from staff, from the applicant, from members of the public before deliberating with my colleagues, and only then doing the job we were appointed to do, which is to provide a recommendation to City Council. So I'm sure everyone is eager to get this started. I could continue to refute the particularities of Mr. Packard's request, but I believe that my previous response on record does that. Recusal is something that each of us on this commission, along with staff and legal counsel, take seriously. And it is respected when required. And so I want to reiterate that the people that I have spoken to are all in agreement that my hearing this matter is entirely appropriate. And so what I'd like to do is put that to rest and get to the business of the Planning Commission so we can do what we were appointed to do.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Bodnar. With that, I think we'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair Meadows, members of the Planning and Transportation Commission. I just want to introduce Tracy Wazinski. She is our Assistant City Attorney, and she will be assisting us with any questions that we have regarding the project this evening. We appreciate her presence here at the Planning and Transportation Commission this evening. I'm sorry, it's Katie. I apologize. we just met face-to-face a little bit ago, so... So on we go with the project. You are considering this evening a new commercial project at 40 Main Street in the downtown core of Los Altos. Here is a picture of the building that is superimposed on the other structures looking down Main Street from San Antonio Road. It's a 3-story structure on a lot that's right around 6,950 square feet in size. The zone district there is CRS OAD, that is our commercial retail sales and office zone district. The building that is being proposed this evening for you to make a recommendation onto the City Council to is a 3-story commercial office building. The net square footage in the 3 levels of the building is right around 17,428 square feet. That's the gross square footage, excuse me. And then the net square footage of the building is 15,872 square feet. The difference between the gross and the net are really the areas, the usable areas within the floors of the building. This project has gone under environmental review as is required per the California Environmental Quality Act. We conducted an initial study on the project. There had been a previous project at the site that had undergone an initial study, so we felt that it would be prudent to undergo initial study again. That analysis did not find that there were significant impacts that the project would generate that could not be mitigated to a less than significant level. The 3 areas where we needed to develop some mitigation measures were air quality, cultural resources, hydrology, and water ecology, or water quality. Again, mitigations were proposed for all three of the impacts that are identified in this study. That document, once it's complete, is circulated for a 20-day public review, and that public review period ended yesterday, June the 14th. One of the things that we did look at, in addition to circulation in the downtown regarding the project, was also the parking and whether there was a sufficient supply of parking to accommodate the parking demand for the project. The applicants have provided a study that was used in the initial study and part of the analysis of the project, and it did find that within a reasonable distance of the project site, there is sufficient supply of parking to accommodate the parking that is not being provided by the project. So that was not identified as a significant impact, and there were no mitigation measures that were prepared to mitigate any potential negative impacts that the parking could have. Here is a floor plan showing the first level of the building. This is, again, the ground level plan. It's an open office space. At this point in time, this office space is not divided up into separate offices that the applicants could certainly do at some point in the future. It shows that the site has the frontage on Main Street, excuse me, and then extends back towards Parking Plaza 10, which is a public parking plaza. And then on the left side of the proposed structure is a public paseo that will allow people going from Main Street to access the parking plaza at the back of the site. That paseo also provides entrances to the stairwell, the elevator access, and a lobby area that is part of the building. Here's a cross-section through the building. This is sort of on the short tangent of the building. Doesn't show the section through the actual tower element or that turret element that is being proposed as part of the structure. The height of the building is at 38 feet, and then the tower element does go up to 45 feet. The first floor level does maintain that 12-foot ceiling height that is required per the zoning regulations for the CRS OAD zone district. Now looking at the design of the building, this is the view of the building from Main Street. You can see that it has the three levels. The third level does step back. There is a deck there at the front of the building at the third level. And this particular elevation shows the building superimposed on the site with the two adjacent buildings grayed out. On the left-hand side, you can see the silhouette of a couple of persons. That's the location of the paseo that goes back to Parking Plaza 10. And going down that paseo, this is the elevation of the building from the paseo. You can see the tower element there on the right, and then the three floors of the structure, you have the arched windows that face out into the paseo area, and then you have a different roof treatment for this portion of the building. There with the gable roof over the center portion and a flat roof projecting element over the two wings of that gable element. Then going around to the back side of the building, this is the elevation that faces Parking Plaza 10. You can see the tower element off in the distance there. That's grayed out. That's again at Main Street. And this elevation provides another access into the building, along with access to the refuse, the recycling areas that are part of the building. Plus, it has a window that faces into the interior office space. Taking one more turn around the building, then you come to what is basically the north side of the building. This is the side of the building that is adjacent to the taller building that has frontage on both San Antonio Road and Edith Avenue. Given that this building is in very close proximity to that adjacent building, there's not a lot of articulation or change in terms of features on this side of the building, but it does, once you get up above the height of the adjacent building, does provide some relief to the structure and some architectural interest by those arched sort of decorative reliefs that are on the side of the building. The materials of the building are principally stucco, along with the windows. There's some relief to the windows. They're recessed, and they have a nice window trim or detail around those. The roof of the proposed structure is slate, and then there are also some stone accents to the building that you'll see on a couple of the elevations. We did at the staff level have some concern with the design of the building. We did enlist the assistance of an architect to take a look at the design and provide some suggestions that we've included in your packet, and were also included as part of the environmental review. that showed some alternative designs, different uses of materials, possibly setting the third floor, that third level of the building, within the roof line of the building and introducing some dormers. Here you can see a couple of concepts that have the horizontal wood siding at the lower level, and then above that the stucco on the second level. This is a little bit different concept where you have the stucco on the first level and then the horizontal siding at the second level, and a little bit different treatment to the third floor within the roof that prior to had gable elements in that third floor roof. This one has a hipped roof element. And then there is a potential sketch of what the building looks like with a little bit different design treatment. Here is the public paseo. It at its widest point is right around 10 feet in width, and that's from the property line adjacent to the building next to it, the one-story building that is next to it. At its narrowest, I think it comes down to about 6 feet where the tower element is located. And again, this will be landscaped and provide that pedestrian paseo that goes from Main Street back to Parking Plaza 10. The public paseo is being shown or being proposed as being the public benefit for the project. And in return for that public benefit, that paseo that, again, gets the people alongside the building from Main Street to the parking, the applicants are requesting 3 incentives. The first incentive is an increase in the height of the building from the allowed 30 feet to 38 feet. 45 feet for the tower, a reduction in the on-site parking requirements from 29 spaces to 0 spaces, and this is the parking requirement for an office type of use, and then the reduction in the rear yard setback for the upper floors of the building. In order to grant an exception, the City Council would need to make findings that support the exception. We put up on the board the findings that are needed in order to grant the exception and accept the public benefit that is related to those exceptions. We, at the staff level, don't feel that this particular public benefit supports the proposed incentives for the project. Given specifically a couple reasons. The one is the downtown design plan does call for pedestrian paseos and plazas and access at different locations in the downtown, but what we've put up on the screen is the locations that are included in that that downtown design plan that shows the locations of those paseos, those public plazas. Those are indicated in blue on this design diagram. And then in green is the project location. So there's no connection or no link indicated on that plan showing a connection between Main Street that the project has frontage on and the parking plaza at the back. Another reason that we're not certain that the project, the proposed public benefit supports the requested exceptions is that there exists at this time at least a couple of other connections between Main Street and Parking Plaza 10. One of those is the drive aisle that goes alongside Wells Fargo Bank, and then right adjacent to the project site at 40 Main is another public paseo that goes back to the parking plaza. Those 2 locations are indicated in blue on the above map, and then the proposed paseo or public paseo is shown there in green at 40 Main, or where the paseo would be located on the project. This evening, you're not taking action to approve or deny the application and the request before you. You are making a recommendation on to the City Council. You're making a recommendation on the environmental review that has been conducted, the conditional use permit along with the design review application, and then a recommendation on the public benefits and the incentives that are requested. Your options this evening are to recommend approval of the project to the City Council. You can recommend denial of the project to the City Council, or you can refer to the project back to the applicant to address specific items that you feel need to be addressed in order for you to arrive at a point where you feel you might be able to make a recommendation onto the City Council. As you can see in a staff report, we've recommended that you share with the Council that a denial be recommended, again, because the public benefits requested aren't adequately supported by the public benefit that is being presented. This is the last of my slides, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners might have.
Go right ahead.
So I have 2 questions. One is, Can you explain how the original number of 29 required spaces was determined?
Sure. We took a look at the zoning code, and the zoning code says that for a parcel that participated in the creation of the parking plazas, there is no parking required for the first 100 square feet, or excuse me, 100% FAR of the lot size, 6,950. So for 6,950 square feet of this building, there is no parking that is required. Subtracting that amount then out of the net square footage of the building, you come up with a total, and for a parking use, you would divide that total by 300 square feet, which is the parking requirement for an office use per our zoning code. And that is where the 29 parking spaces is arrived at.
Okay, and my second question is a much more general one, and it's actually for commission as well, which is that the City Council instituted a policy of story poles, and they are not up in compliance with the story pole ordinance. And I feel that we have, as you say in your third bullet point, I believe that we don't have sufficient information to give this project a full review. I believe that in addition to us, I believe that the public doesn't have sufficient information to make a decision that's based on fact, where you can actually see how tall the various pieces are. And so I'm wondering whether I should start by saying I probably have the longest historic memory of the entire people here because David Cornfield is not here, and he's the only one who precedes me. So I will say that as a general policy, when it was first Architecture and Site Committee of the Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission became the PTC, it has always been the policy to accept full applications for review. And if someone didn't post a notice or didn't meet the requirements, staff would not bring it to us. So I am suggesting that I would not like to see a precedent set that we discuss incomplete information. But since people turned out because it was formally noticed, I believe that we should take public comment, that people who comment should not be forbidden from commenting again once there's more information available, and that we should therefore do that and then continue our discussions until we have enough information to do it.
I think since we have legal counsel here, they're probably in the best position to give us advice on this.
Well, it's not a legal issue for me, it's policy. But I'll be glad to take legal counsel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So if it is indeed the practice and policy of the city to require story poles and you don't have them in front of you, I can certainly see how the commission would wish to have that information. I don't agree that it's, I do believe that it's not necessarily a legal issue, but if you feel the application is complete and you don't have all information in front of you, you could hear from the public and then return at a later date when and if those story poles were placed.
Yeah, so I think we do need to hear from the public. I also would like to get some questions of clarification answered while we're here as well, and then that way, if we come back rather than making a decision tonight, we'll at least be that much further along. So let's continue with our questions of clarification if we can.
Yeah. Can I just maybe ask the same question a different
Turn on
way?
your mic, please.
Maybe ask the same question a different way. So I guess this is an application that came in before the story poles were required?
The application did come in before the story pole requirement, but the application was not complete until after the story pole requirement was put in place.
So if we do anything, I guess we're going to have to do all this all over again?
No, you wouldn't necessarily have to do it all over again. You could take public comment, take the applicant presentation, close the public hearing, and then ask for require that the story poles be put up. And then when it's rescheduled for your consideration, limit public comment to the comments regarding the the impression of the story polls and then begin your deliberations on the merits of the application.
Okay.
I have a question, follow-up to what you just said, John. Why would we potentially limit public comment to the comment on story polls? I thought one of the purposes of story polls was to alert people that there was something going on and give them notice, essentially a different type of notice, that there's something coming before the commission and give them a chance to come and speak.
That was one of the ways to kind of control the meeting and keep the application process moving forward. I think that depends somewhat, however, on the public comment that you receive in response to accurate story polls being put up. So you could certainly open it up to more than just what are your thoughts and ideas regarding the story polls.
Okay, I think I would defer to the chair here on.
Yeah, if we're going to have
Guidance there.
public comment, I don't see why we'd limit it to impressions of the story polls. We'd just open it up again, in my opinion, so.
So can I ask?
Should we find out why the story polls aren't there? Is
I don't
there
think
a-
that matters, they're just not there. I mean, they weren't there in
If
the,
there's a, like, engineering difficulty.
Now, you may remember that one of our city councilors is an engineer, and she said that there was no problem putting up story poles.
Right, but what someone's impression is and what the reality is may be different. So if there is a viability problem in actually doing this in a manner that we require, like if it cannot be done.
They're partially in.
We should,
Yeah.
right, so we should find out why
right,
they
but we won't
look-
find out now at clarification. We can find out when applicant talks, when we get to that point. But let's
I have a couple
further
more
clarify.
clarification.
Okay,
Questions.
you're finished, Alex?
I still have
Oh.
clarification questions,
Okay,
if that's okay.
please go ahead.
So, John, I guess you're saying that there's 3 variances that they're asking for?
Exception.
Or exceptions, sorry.
What's that magic
They're
word?
incentives.
So the first one is from 30 to 38 feet,
Correct.
right? And then I just want to try to understand, so the 30 feet is to the roof deck,
Right, that's
Right.
to the top of the building and does not include parapets
Right.
or towers or any other element.
and then our code is another 12 feet or 15 feet, I guess, just depending on when the application was made and when it was deemed complete.
Yeah, the code as it's written right now is 12 feet above the maximum height for a given zone district.
Okay.
So when did you deem the application to be complete? What's our cutoff date in terms of changes in the code?
It was September of 2016.
Yes, and those changes weren't approved until November of 2016, that reduced it from 15 to 12 feet for the tower.
So is the operable, is it 15 feet?
I don't recall that 15 feet was,
It was.
my
Towers were
review
15 feet.
was that they were 8 feet. I'll take a look.
You know, this is a fact. We don't have to discuss it.
We don't have to, yeah.
We
No, it's
just-
just a clarification
yeah. Well,
question.
and the answer is, it's not clear.
Yes.
And we want that
Septem-
fact.
but September-
And we want that fact.
Yeah,
Yes, we do.
September factually is your date for
Application.
declaring that you had a complete proposal.
Right.
Okay.
And so my other clarification question is with respect to the third exception of the 2 feet encroachment, and whether that's actually an exception or, because it seemed to be part of the code that allows for encroachment up to actually 4 feet into the setback.
Our reading of the code is that the setback, if the building abuts a parking plaza, then the setback is 2 feet. In
On all
this-
levels.
On all the levels. So,
Something that's not clear in the code.
So, do you happen to have a copy of the code?
Oh. I mean, that's another fact that we can bring forward. I think
we can look that up.
let's make note of that so we get the answers
Sure.
to both of these. They're facts. So, Anita, you look like you had no more clarifications. Any down on this?
Do you want to go?
No, I'm okay.
I'm a little confused regarding the parking waivers that have been granted. It's been brought up that many of the waivers that have been granted in the last few years were not necessarily related to an incentive or some sort of like the PASE or some other benefits. So I'm just curious, how do we go about, I'm new to this, how do we go about judging whether a parking waiver is done appropriate or not? Is there any place that we can read up on how these are granted?
Well, there is the work of the citywide parking committee that did take a look at the parking exceptions that were granted to a number of projects in the downtown. That could provide some guidance, but each one appears to be a little set of unique circumstances, and taking a look at what the code requirements are to this particular project on this site, that's how we arrived at the parking requirements for this project.
Okay.
So I had a question of clarification. In this section, it's page 8, where you talk about parking.
Page 8 of the agenda report?
Page 8 of the report, yeah. The first paragraph, where we talk about a shared parking environment and whether it makes sense to have a lower parking ratio in that situation. And I was surprised by the last sentence, and I'm not sure if that's what staff intended. But
Can you read that sentence?
Yeah, so the sentence before is the study, the parking demand study that the applicant got suggested that you should have a lower parking standard than required by zoning code in a shared parking environment, like a downtown area, right? And then staff says this type of analysis makes sense if a project, a single project is how I interpret it, has a mix of uses that have different timing for the parking needs of those uses, such as a project that has residential office and a dedicated parking area. And I was surprised because I can't imagine that we're going to start saying anybody who does mixed use, that creates a shared parking environment that diminishes what we would require by zoning code. And my question, did you mean to say that? And the second question is, do you agree that in a shared parking environment, not just a single building that has multiple uses, you should have lower parking standards?
I would agree with that, and I was referring specifically to a single site with a mix of uses where you have the uses that are offset in the times of day that they use those uses. But and this was for the analysis from an environmental review standpoint, and whether or not the demand for parking would have a significant impact on the supply that was at hand. Our code isn't there yet, however, so we have to look at the code requirements, and whether it be 29 spaces or some lower amount that a change to the code could result in, the project still doesn't provide that parking on site. And is the benefit that is provided for the public significant enough to outweigh that exception to the code?
I don't think we want to discuss parking until we get to discussion.
Yeah, so other clarification question? I have a couple then. So on that Greenan report or assessment, I saw no date in that, though it did say John Biggs, so I know it's within your tenure. So when did we get that? And why did we get that? Did we get a similar thing? Again, this is before my experience. Did we get a similar design input for 400 Main, for example?
No, this was, I recall that the final document came in around sometime the middle of December. No, we did not get one for 400 Main, but the Downtown Building Committee did recommend that architectural review does get conducted on some of these larger projects that come forward before the city. I think the specific recommendation from the committee was that we try and get that architectural review analysis and input before we even get an application at the kind of concept stage. This project was in the works already, and given the concerns that I had with the design of the building, I thought it would be beneficial to provide an additional sort of peer review of the design and have that information available to the Planning and Transportation Commission, the public, and the City Council in terms of what could be done to the design of the building to make it more appropriate for the setting that it's in.
And I'd add that it wasn't just a recommendation of the DB Design Downtown Building Committee, but it was accepted and endorsed by council.
Is this, so then another way to ask the question is this the first time we've gotten design input?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Then my other question is, because there's, if you look at, this may end up being a question for applicant, but if you look at page A03, it's all about a new parking. Is there a proposal to restripe the parking lot in this application? I didn't see it anywhere in staff report, and the only allusion to that is the A03. Again, we can talk about it when applicant brings forward.
No, there's
So that's not
no
being offered.
active application to restripe, no plans on the part of the city to restripe that lot
Okay.
at this time.
All right, thank you. That's all my clarifications. Everybody good? All right. So then we're going to open public comment. We've got quite a few cards here. I'm going to.
Applicant get to say something?
What's that? Oh, yes, applicant, sorry.
So, good evening.
My apologies. Go right ahead.
Not a problem. Bill Maston, I'm here to represent the applicant this evening. I'm going to actually change the format a little bit about what I was going to talk about and actually talk about story polls first and how we arrived at what we have out there today because it seems to be concerns about it.
I'm going to just clarify that you would like to give the applicant's representative 10 minutes.
Yes,
Is that
that is what we
Okay, I'll try to be
standardly
speedy.
do.
And
Yes.
I hope that you'll ask questions so that I can answer all of your questions. With that being said, I did meet with John Biggs out in the field, and he expressed to me his concern about not fully providing all the story poles necessary to show the building in its entirety. Now, if you keep in mind that the story pole concept came about primarily in residential, it's easy to do when you have 10-foot or 17-foot setbacks, but it's very difficult to do when you actually have your story poles on a public right-of-way on a property line without endangering the public. I went to 3 different contractors, all said, pass, I'm not going to do this. So we came to the conclusion of what was done and asked the question what was done on El Camino. El Camino was not able to provide full pole documentation for the same reason. So no precedent is being set. It's been done before. So to apply the story poles in their entirety actually in some cases creates risk. So how is this solved? In the ordinance, it specifically says that alternatives can be used to demonstrate the same thing a story pole would. And as you saw from our previous meeting, I'm actually using the animations to do just that. So the combination of the story poles plus the animation actually is providing the law necessary to be in compliance. So with that being said, I'd like to now start our presentation and let everybody in the audience know that the story poles...
Mr. Maston, you're talking to us.
The story poles, I'm talking to everyone.
Yes, that's
The
correct.
story poles are actually representing along Main Street, 10 feet back from the property line, 34 feet, 11 inches tall, which is actually where the wall of the 3rd floor balcony exists. So just as a reference point. With that being said, in showing everybody the animation, which we'll start now, the purpose of the animation was actually to show the building in context of what is existing and what will it look like when we're complete with this project. To let you know how this was actually created, first we went to Google Earth. We then
Bill.
got public documents.
Here. Look here.
I hope I get an extra minute for that. We then went to public documents so that we could actually measure specifically the heights of the buildings, and then physically went out into the field to verify some of those dimensions. So from those three sources, we created what we think is very accurate within a number of inches. Now, I want to point out a few things as we go through this. So since it's done in perspective, we're able to not only demonstrate the relationship between individual buildings, but most importantly, as we're seeing here, how the three buildings that are of most importance at the moment to the gateway of downtown will look together. And I think that's important to demonstrate to everybody what we're really talking about, how the three buildings or future buildings added onto it will look together, because that is our gateway. No individual building is our gateway. Now, we have a discussion that we'll talk about next, is the public benefits of actually having a usable, updated, beautiful new parking lot that's restriped, that meets current code, etc. So I'm going to talk about that next, but basically, again, this animation is here to show you in context of what's existing. To talk briefly about the Paseo. This Paseo is dedicated to the public. In the previous presentation by Mr. Biggs, the other two Paseos are not Paseos at all. One of them is a driveway, dangerous. The other one is on private property and could be changed at any time. So the fact that this is an open, dedicated public right-of-way in perpetuity is important to the city, and it is in fact a public benefit. Beyond that, the Paseo does something else. It creates architecture. Because the Paseo exists, when we're coming down Main Street, we actually see a wall of glass in architecture. Currently, the side of the Packard building is a blank wall. So the benefit of the Paseo actually helps create additional architecture as well. Now, the last time we talked briefly about the benefits of public parking. I wanted to actually clarify for a minute. If so desired, the applicant is willing, as part of this application, as a way to mitigate any concerns, provide the public benefits of improving the park at Lot 10. So with that being said, I'd like to talk about parking Lot 10. Keep in mind that parking Lot 10 is 50 years old or more, and that as a result, it's antiquated, doesn't meet current code, and doesn't meet code regarding to accessibility, doesn't provide many features. So the car park report that's included in our application actually does not require any additional parking. So this is really being done as a public benefit. But what happens with existing circulation in a one-way traffic, which we have now, is it actually puts the turnarounds on Edith and on 4th Street, which is really quite dangerous. It actually also requires people to travel completely through a parking lot in order to get back to the other side. Now, if we look at this alternative that's being discussed, which is to take parking Lot 10 and then to reconfigure it and update it to 90-degree parking, it has lots of public benefits. First of all, it creates additional parking places. The actual count for this by itself, depending on whether you use 8.5 or 9 foot wide parking spaces, is somewhere in the 16 to 25 or 26 spaces. If we then take additional increases in parking along Main Street and 4th Street and along portions of parking lot 9, we can achieve 28 to 30 additional parking spots within the same area. The other thing that it does is it upgrades our stormwater prevention, which is now a new state mandated law, so that we're keeping all of the pollutants from the parking lot in the parking lot. So once again, this public benefit is really just being in compliance with current code with the state of California. So we would want to point out to all of you that we end up with more landscaping. We are actually beautifying something that helps set a new standard and tells the public we're not just putting feet on the street, we're beautifying our parking lots and setting an example for what can be done elsewhere. Now, with that being said, I want to go back to the Paseo. The Paseo itself is, in fact, architecture. It's not just a pathway. Those panels that you saw on the left give us opportunity to add art, whether we consider it public art or not. It's a public right-of-way. Then that gives us the opportunity to do more than just what might disappear when the other projects next to it are developed. So with that being said, that's our general overview. I would like to actually limit my presentation now so I have the opportunity to answer your questions and those raised by the public.
Well, we certainly ask questions, but I don't think you're going to be addressing questions from the public in this forum necessarily. So any commissioners have questions for the applicant?
Okay, so then I'll just finish up
Okay.
by a couple other things. When we are speaking of architecture, yes, everybody will have their opinion about the style of architecture. Whether something is in compliance is different than the style of architecture. The question of whether something is complete on a certain date is a different issue. And interesting enough, if we look forward to what was just passed at the end of the year with the Downtown Building Committee, we would actually be under the height requirement maximums based upon those recommendations that were implemented. So with that being said, I'll follow up in a little bit.
Okay, now you can stay there in case we have questions for you. And
I do. So my question is, your name is not on the drawings, and so I had some concerns about the choices that were made architecturally, but you're not the one to ask.
I am the one to ask.
Okay, so this building turns its back on Main Street. It does not have any access except by going down the Paseo. And so the idea of continuous activity along our Main Street was a design decision that was chosen not.
That's just for me, not for you.
I know.
So to answer that question, in general, the idea of having the storefront, which even though it's an office building, having that storefront facade along Main Street without the access actually just accentuates that facade. However, the way the modular units are set up, those windows could easily be converted to accessible doors if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And that would actually in part be dependent upon who the tenant was.
they showed it.
The other thing is if you look at the rendering that was provided, there are actually doors facing Main Street.
It's not that there weren't doors. What I meant is the entry to the building, the focal point when you go, the lobby, thank you,
Oh, the lobby.
is not, when you say, I'm arriving at 40 Main, it's down an alley. It's not on the main street, where everything we're doing in town is to activate State and Main. That's the heart of our town.
Right. So, again, it depends on where you're trying to put the primary focus. When someone is walking along Main Street that is filled with storefronts, do we want to look at a staircase lobby, or do we want to see the activity within it? So
Well-
it was just a choice made from a priority standpoint.
Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying
Of
question?
course.
Because when I look at the floor plan, it looks like there are doors to the ground floor
Facing Main.
facing Main. And I guess I was just assuming that lobby, that would be the main entrance for the ground floor, and the lobby is really to provide access to the
The upper floors. That is correct.
Okay, so I just
Good
wanted to
clarifying.
make sure I understood.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? You went to 3 companies. Are they for the story poles? Are they well-known companies? Have they done business in neighboring towns? Are there other companies that you considered?
I've been doing story polls for almost, 20 years plus in different communities up and down the peninsula, and These are the three that I use, and actually I know two of them in particular, I believe, have been doing business in Los Altos, so I'm comfortable with them. And if you look at actually what's installed in the field, they've developed their own way to efficiently put up story poles without it being made of lumber. So, the whole industry's actually evolved, but there definitely is a liability involved when you're applying what I consider to be a residential requirement that I think is important in Los Altos with our residential homes. But when you apply it to a commercial piece of property that allows the building to be right up against the public right-of-way, that's a little bit different responsibility and liability, and that was what I was told, and that's why they all initially passed.
Well, considering that this entire planning commission voted unanimously at the time to not recommend story poles on commercial property, you're not going to get much of an argument here.
Okay.
I have a clarifying question
Yeah.
about the story poles of staff. To refresh our recollection on what was done on El Camino or required.
My recollection on the El Camino project, the story pole netting did not go across the entire frontage of the or span between the story poles that were depicting the height. Rather, they had just panels of netting at the locations where the corners of the building were to be, that showed that height in relation to El Camino Real and in the height in relation to other buildings on the property. We did get some pushback on our desire or kind of relaxing of the standards for the story poles, and we were informed that it was important to make sure that everyone complied with the story pole requirements, because it does provide the community with an opportunity to see what a building is like in its setting. So that was the reason I was not in support of relaxing the standards.
I also had a conversation with David about those story poles. I'm sorry, I also had a conversation with David Cornfield about those story poles on 4880, and what I recall him telling me is that they did not go to the top of the parapet because they couldn't get them to go up that high, and therefore, if you looked at the drawing that was posted at 4880, it showed in red where those story poles went, and it actually, the poles had two sets of netting on them. One was at the, as I recall, it was the floor of the fifth story, and then I think it was the ceiling, no, the roof deck of the building, but not the parapet, and there was nothing to indicate where or how high the elevator, for example, went. That's my recollection, John.
Okay. Actually, Bill, I have a clarification question for you.
Yes.
Sorry, you were relaxing there. So the plans that we're looking at in this application are dated September 2013, and that predates many of our actually participation on PTC. So are these the plans then that, if you could help me understand, did these go to City Council at that time and it was denied, or what are these plans from?
Okay, well, I'm glad you have a date. Or if you're saying that the date of your plans are...
Every single page of the plans says September 16th, 2013.
Well, let's add to the list of things that could go wrong this evening. The plans that were submitted are dated July 15th, 2016. Those were the prior plans.
The set that we gave to the commission, those were submitted by the applicants for a reduced set.
Now I'm thoroughly confused.
So the applicant provided the actual dead pieces of tree,
Yes.
Right.
and they were incorrect, according to Bill.
No,
So-
the plans that we submitted to the city are dated. I have a copy of it right here.
This is what I'm like.
Every single page?
These are
It
the,
says submit, received, June 6th.
No, and I'm not, I have a receive date of June 6,
6.
2017, but the date at the bottom of every single page of plans is September 2013.
I'd have to look at what you have.
Okay. So,
Anita's in charge.
all right, Anita will give you that. My question then, that if this is indeed plans, regardless of when they were received, but are from September 2013, this is going on close to 4 years later. Surely whatever happened between now and then, I mean, haven't there been changes made in that nearly 4 years?
So actually, from an exterior standpoint, there are basically no changes to the exterior configuration. The changes are actually interior.
All right. So then what you're showing us on the exterior plans are plans that were last reviewed by council, is that correct?
No.
No.
PTC? I mean, when was, so
No, they were never reviewed by council.
the September 2013 plans never went to council and never came to PTC either?
I think they came to PTC.
I don't believe so, because I believe the first project was rejected in 2011, 2012, so this would have been part of the initial application.
Gotcha. Okay, so I just got a clarification.
Yes.
What you have in front of you is the original application submittal,
Okay.
not the updated set that was sent.
This is, if you have a different set, it was the set that was originally given to the city for this application, and then there was an update, and I don't know if Bill didn't get the correct update or not, but there was another step. So in other words, September, you said 2013?
Yes.
That's when we applied for this hearing. That's how long it's been, and
Okay, so you're saying this September 2013 has never been reviewed by any city body?
that is correct.
Okay, that's where I was trying to go. All right. So do we have any further clarification questions for applicant? Yeah, Alex, go Alex.
Just given
Microphone.
trying to understand the image given this image that's on the screen, how tall is the parapet over the roof deck?
Okay. The total height to the top of the parapet is approximately 38 feet,
Okay,
including the parapet.
right.
And the total height, including the tower, is 45 feet.
And what's the height of the top of the roof deck?
The top of the roof deck is approximately 37 feet 4 inches.
Right, and so that's, because that looks like more than 6 inches.
It does.
When I look at this parapet,
No. You're talking about, you'd have to please clarify that.
sure. If you're looking at the top of the roof deck, where essentially the roof equipment is sitting, and the top of the parapet wall, right? So it looks like it's
Yeah, this,
white, the
Yes,
gray and the white.
that is.
Rim.
And so,
How tall is that?
how tall is that white area? Because it looks like it's,
It's a little bit more than 1 foot, maybe 18 inches.
and from this drawing, it would look like it's more than, because I guess one of the things I was going to ask is there a way to bring this parapet down if it looks like that big?
Right.
But if it's in reality only 12 or 18 inches,
We would require on any flat roof structure a minimum of probably 6 to 8 inches. However, since flat roofs aren't flat and they're actually sloped, it depends on what portion of the building we were looking at.
understood from actual, the way it would actually be constructed. I'm just saying in the view, the parapet looks, like if we're looking at this to try to get perspective, I just want to make sure it's accurate because the parapet looks like it's.
So I'm more than happy to look at our drawings and building sections and make sure they comply and review that with you.
Got it. But your belief is that that parapet is 12 to 18 inches above the roof deck,
That's correct.
and that is at 38 feet.
Plus or minus, yes.
Hey, Anita, you have a,
Yeah,
oh, sorry, Alex. you-
No, so let's just say it was 2 feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the top of your roof deck would be at 36, right?
Mm-hmm. No, the top of the roof is approximately 37 feet 4 inches.
I guess I'm just trying to get an understanding of how we're measuring, like how everything's being measured, right? Because
If
we're
you-
saying it's a variance from 30 feet to 38 feet, right? An exception from 30 feet to 38 feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that
Right.
30 feet to 38, so 30 feet is the top of the roof deck, correct?
So that is where the exception would occur. For example, the 38 feet, if it was just a parapet, would be within the ordinance that we currently have. So the issue is whether what we're going for is an exception to the ceiling height or roof height, not the parapet height.
I totally get it, right? Because
Okay.
your parapet could be 42 feet or 45 feet, whatever it is, right? Somewhere in that range. And I don't want to get into opinions here because it's really more asking questions, but
Yeah.
that's what you're actually going to see, right?
And that's to protect the public from the view of the HVAC machines.
Understood.
And so it's not there just randomly. 6 inches at an edge of a deck, of a roof deck, would not be sufficient to hide the machines from view.
I guess just depending on where they're actually
Exactly.
located.
Can I draw the commissioner's attention to sheet A8 of the plans that you have? Those are the cross sections through the building. And if you look at cross section 2, you can see that the roof slopes from the left to the right. So on the left-hand side, the roof comes up and just tucks under the top of the parapet and then slopes down to the right where the distance between the top of the roof deck and the top of the parapet is a little bit more.
No, I get it, but there's just no dimensions, right? So it's hard to tell.
Yeah, there's a
What
parapet
about-
height of
It
38
says
feet called out.
38 parapet,
38, but there's nothing to the top of the roof.
right.
It's just under that.
Right, so
So-
there's no,
So, go ahead.
so there's no actual, or what I found on both the elevations and these sections is no specific measurement that correlates to what the code requires, which is a measurement to the roof deck.
Okay. We're happy to add those
do it.
dimensions for you, so you can make references at different points, as well as add documentation of exactly where the story poles are in the field relative to those sections.
Yeah, because I think your exception is going to end up being less.
37.6.
So I also want to point out that even though the dates are different, the documents are the same. They haven't changed since the submittal. They were just updated for a new submittal date of last year, so I'm sorry for the earlier confusion on this.
So really, the issue that I brought up earlier of incomplete application, we now have more pieces.
That you consider incomplete?
I mean, requests for more pieces
Well,
of information.
We're missing pieces of information that allow the public to know what they're actually getting, and it's not even clear to me, though I think I understand now. What Alex is saying is if the measurement is to the parapet, and the parapet is allowed to be taller than the roof deck, and the roof deck is allowed to be 30 feet, then in fact, the exception being asked for is less than 8 feet because the parapet itself is less than that. So in fact, we need, as we are fond of saying,
clarity. Right.
And what it does to take it a step farther is that since the new ordinance allows it to go up to 12 feet, the height of this parapet is actually 4 feet less than what the current ordinance allows.
Correct.
And I would add that I believe that that was something that was done in error, and I've had a discussion with Mr. Biggs where I think there was a mistake in how the council's direction to staff resulted in the changes to the ordinance, and they split what used to be E into E and F, and they were so I think it's actually an error. But what and this is a question half for you and half for Mr. Biggs. The code section that applies to parapets prior to November 2016, that's why these dates kind of matter, but the code that was in effect prior to 2016 said, and I quote, "However, no penthouse or roof structure or any space above the height limit," which would mean the roof deck, "shall be allowed for the purpose of providing additional usable floor space for dwelling, retailing, or storage of any type." The code revision as of November 2016 added to that list of dwelling, retailing, or storage the words commercial and advertising for clarity. So I'm confused.
Oh, no.
How it is that usable space, what I think I heard you say is that the applicant perceives they are allowed to have usable space up to 38 feet at the height that would otherwise be allowed for the parapet, and that contravenes what I just read. So help me out.
Oh, so that is actually one of the exceptions that they're asking for. That is the exception that they're asking for, is the change in the height.
Okay, so it's not that they feel entitled to that.
Pardon?
It's not that they are allowed to go to 38 feet. They are asking to go to 38 feet, and that's one of the exceptions.
No, only as it relates to the roof height, not the parapet height. So I just want to clarify for you that's the exception, because what we're seeing on the outside is now currently permissible under the code. What you're seeing behind the parapet, which we can't see, is actually what they're asking as an exception for.
So yes, so they're asking to go 8 feet up from the otherwise allowed roof deck to the roof deck of this building, approximately either 37 and change.
Yeah.
Right?
From 30 to 37.
So I think that's why it's important to have the roof deck that's here.
Okay.
Okay, and to make sure that we understand that's the exception that's being, incentive.
The incentive.
Exception. No, exception. I had it right the first time. That's being asked for. Thank you.
Okay.
Just finish
Yeah.
my questions.
All right, go ahead.
So I was just wondering if you had any comments to the architectural comments, I guess third-party peer review, what your comments would be to that. I mean, you didn't design this building. What changes would you make
Well,
building?
so first I look at it really in the big picture, and that's really what is this building providing to downtown, right? And once I've gotten through that, and that's even part of our discussion this evening, but as far as architectural detailing, it's the eyes of the beholder is really ultimately what prevails, and so does the public review process. But for example, I've had people say to me when I've shown this to people, I love the turret. Other people have said, I don't like the turret. So for myself, do I think that the building is fine-grained, meaning the proportions are small enough to maintain the historic modulars that are downtown? Yes, I do. The individual details of the style, that's something that I'm going to leave up to you. But, I mean, generally speaking, I think the forms as they're viewed from the street, and as we can show you in our animations, I think they're proportional with the hotel across the street, and they're even proportional with what's next door. And that's different than what happened on 40 Main Street or with the Safeway building, where we have these large volumes, these big blocks that are not broken up into modules that represent that era. And I think this does represent that era from this perspective.
And do you have any any feedback in terms of the peer review, anything that you agree with or don't agree with?
Well, interesting enough, he does talk about the benefits of a turret. I'm not necessarily in agreement of changing the materials. If you look at the majority of the buildings downtown, they're stucco. And when you start introducing wood siding into this, then that has its own set of problems over time. It's mainly a maintenance thing. It's not necessarily an aesthetic thing. So I think the issues might be, is the use of wood siding appropriate for a downtown business? And historically, I would say no. So on that regard, I would probably disagree with his suggestion that it be changed to wood.
Though, of course, lately we're not seeing wood at all. We're only seeing composition. For
No,
just
and
the
one of
reason
his
you're
options,
saying.
he's
I know, but in fact, what we see up here much more frequently is not wood siding. We're seeing hardy siding.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because, as you say, long-term maintenance for wood on a commercial building is a built-in problem.
Yeah, I hope that helps.
All right, so we're done with applicant clarifying questions. Okay, thank you. So I have a stack of public speaking cards, quite a stack, so we're going to limit each speaker to 2 minutes. I'm going to sort of queue people up, and there's more coming in still, so if you want to speak, please get those cards in. I'm going to queue people up, so please be ready to go to the podium so we can make everyone's progress as fast as possible. So and apologies if I mess up your names. So we're going to start with, it looks like Robert Sinclair, but I think it's okay, so you're going to be first. Let me just get the next two lined up as well. Followed by Brendan Pratt and Vaughn Packard. And this is more or less the order that we received the cards, so no special.
How many minutes?
2 minutes, I said, yes.
Good. I think I could do faster than that. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present. I gave the same words to the town council 4 years ago. Okay, I think this is a stunning building. It's really handsome. All the design elements seem to be in step with the character of the village of Los Altos. So I'm pleased with the look. I'm pleased with the building. Any alternatives I saw were not nearly as nice as the one that I think are being presented. If the building would have been approved, 4 years ago, it would have been up already. I think the town has sacrificed $1 million worth of tax revenue just because of kind of petty arguments. I hope this is a gateway to the future of Los Altos. I think it will bring increased commercial traffic. I think the restaurants and the retail environment will benefit. And I thoroughly encourage the Planning Commission and the Town Council to vote yes on this.
All right, thank you. Next is Brendan Pratt, who will be followed by Vaughn Packard, and then Mike Abrams after Vaughn.
Hi, I'm Brendan Pratt, and I'm a child psychologist, and I'm at 4 Main Street, and my main concern is just the parking. Almost all of my meetings with parents start with, my husband will be here in a minute, he's just trying to find parking already, and because of the nature of my business, people have to park essentially every hour. And there's 6 other therapists that are in our suite, and they essentially are in the same position, which is every hour a new client comes in basically from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 6 days a week. So we, we've been in Los Altos for 17 years, and part of the reason that we chose the building was because families, when they drop their kids off for therapy or they drop their kids off for testing, can walk downtown, get something to eat. There's the library. There's sort of everything downtown, and then the other is that there was access to parking. So it would be devastating to us if we didn't have that, and right now it's already difficult to find parking, but if you consider that Main Street Cafe just went out of business, and they were in the adjacent parking lot, and then Maltby's also went out of business, So right now, if you look at it, it's not as horrific as it's been in previous years. But once those two, they're both, I believe, going to be restaurants still. Once those two go back in, then we're going to be right back to where we were. And ironically, one of the things James used to tell me is that most of his staff parked in our parking lot because their parking lot was full. So they would park there and then save places for customers. So all of our staff would be affected. All of our clients would be affected. I sent an email that outlined these concerns. I think it was after the 5 o'clock deadline, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about the email. And my time is up. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I have a question.
You have a question?
I do.
All right.
Sorry, how much staff do you have?
There are, 6 are therapists.
And where do you guys park?
We all park in the same lot.
In
Lot 10.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so I mean, there's 12 total people, but 6 of them are therapists. So 6 of them would have the therapist plus the client.
But 12 total people parking in Plaza 10.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Vaughn, followed by Mike Abrams, and then Annabelle Pelham.
Good evening. I understand that the interior has not been changed. I think we just heard that. And in 2012, the City Council heard the proposal, which is basically the same interior, and unanimously rejected the proposal and concluded that the incentives that were being offered did not meet justification for the exceptions, the 3 exceptions that were being requested, and the same 3 exceptions that are being requested at this time. So I think that unfortunately the changes that needed to be made to come into code to supply the necessary parking just have not been made. If those things were done and things were to come in with code, then we would look at supporting it. But it just hasn't, and they've just not changed to meet the objections of the City Council 4 years ago. It just hasn't changed. I conclude my remarks.
Thank you. Okay, Mike Abrams, followed by Annabelle Pelham and Steve Yarborough.
I'm Mike Abrams. I've been a 22-year resident of Los Altos. I'm speaking in support of the new office building at 40 Main Street for 2 reasons. It is clear that our downtown restaurants and merchants would benefit from additional Class A office space. 8+ years of trying to get building plans approved creates a negative impression of Los Altos' willingness and ability to work with property owners to evolve our downtown. In terms of process, it seems to me that this proposal has gone on long enough. It has been something like 96 months of back and forth with the city on what can and cannot be built at 40 Main. I don't know where the truth is in what is being proposed and what the city believes needs to be changed to allow the building to be built. Both sides never seem to be in sync, and after some 96 months, I can only conclude this is deliberate. If there is a will and an intent on the part of the city to ensure that no new office building is built at 40 Main, then it strikes me that this is wrong, but nonetheless, this would create an affirmative obligation to tell the owners that there is no way they will be allowed to build their building. If that is the case, then stop wasting everyone's time and money. Let's demonstrate to ourselves that we can work productively and timely to solve our outstanding issues and get a new office building built and create more feet on the street for our restaurants and merchants. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Annabelle, followed by Steve Yarborough, and then William Milks.
Well, good evening. I'm Annabelle Pelham. I live at number 1 West Edith in Los Altos, 17-year resident. In my professional life, I'm a gerontologist. The Park Regent is a senior community, independent living senior community. And Plaza 10, Parking Lot 10, as it's called, is a kind of an organic, natural passage of a very large number of older persons from the Park Regent to downtown. I pass that way myself oftentimes, several times a day. And as it currently exists, that's a treacherous place. It really is, especially at night. And seniors, although we beg them not to jaywalk and cut through, they do because getting around is difficult, especially at night and especially in bad weather. I want to support and speak in favor of the Paseo and also the redevelopment and the fixing up of Plaza 10. I think it will remove fall hazards. It'll make it a lot easier for older persons at the Park Regent to move from their apartments over to downtown. It will increase vibrancy. It will add quality of life. Our older persons oftentimes become isolated and lonely, and one of the main reasons is they can't get around. So the development of this property with the lighting, the trees, the benches, the rest of it will really offer an opportunity for older people to get out, get across the street, get downtown, and have a higher quality of life. And so that's why I support it. And I also think the Paseo is going to be like another natural passage for all of us, but older persons in particular, a safe kind of passage from the Park Regent across Edith to downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Steve Yarborough, followed by William Milks, and then Nancy Walsh.
Hi, my name is Steve Yarborough. I'm an attorney, and I've lived and worked in Los Altos now for since 2000. And I live on the corner of Edith and 4th. And I've been in that neighborhood now for 8 years. So this project will affect me, and I'm in favor of it. I think that the proposed parking changes are essential, and I think that the builder's recommendations for revising the plaza parking should really be applied to all of the parking areas in the entire city. It's a good idea. It's time. When the parking plaza was first envisioned many years ago, it was a brilliant stroke, and we are very lucky to have it. But it needs to be updated. It needs to be modernized. It needs to be economized, and this is an opportunity to do that. And I would urge the Commission to endorse this project. A couple of things, with all due respect to the city who analyzed this, I disagree with their conclusion that the use of stucco is inappropriate. I think it is entirely appropriate. If you look at the other buildings in the community, many of them are stucco buildings, and for good reason, because of the maintenance, has been pointed out. There was also criticism by the staff of the relative size of the building to other buildings, and I think that's just misplaced. If you look at the hotel that Abby built, it's a beautiful structure. This complements it. So I think the public benefit of the Paseo was adequately addressed by Annabelle, and I think with those comments, I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you. William Milks, Nancy Walsh, and then Pat Marriott.
Good evening. My name is William Milks. I've been a resident of Los Altos for 15 years, starting back in 2002. I was excited about the prospect of a new office building in downtown Los Altos and followed along the history of this 40 Main Street project. And in fact, I appeared before City Council back in, I believe it was June of 2012, to speak in favor of this building. It's been 5 years almost since that point in time. I was informed by attending that City Council meeting, and many of the points that are being raised tonight were raised back then and are being echoed tonight. And I'd like to echo one particular point that has come up already, and that's the parking issue. I was unaware that there was a parking issue back in 2012, and I'm still unaware that there's a parking issue. I frequent downtown Los Altos. I live about 2.5 miles from here, and drive down to Los Altos downtown for business, go to the post office, have lunch, and in the evening, very often. I was downtown basically every day last week, and this week 3 or 4 days, including tonight. No problem with finding a parking spot, even finding a parking spot in Plaza 10. Following up on Mr. Yarborough's comments, I agree. If it's a case where Parking Plaza 10 can be improved to add additional parking spaces, as well as the amenities and the safety features of better circulation to that particular plaza, that would be a real upgrade. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Walsh, followed by Pat Marriott, and then Mike Connor.
My name is Nancy Walsh, and I'm a longtime resident of Los Altos. I'm going to be really brief because most of the people have said what I want to say, and I think Parking Plaza 10 really needs an upgrade. And if the committee has a chance to have an applicant who wants to do that upgrade, I think they should really seriously consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Pat Marriott, Mike Connor, and
Hi, Pat Marriott.
Wait, let me just get my third person lined up. It's Francis Murray.
Francis Murray.
Francis Murray. Okay. All right, Pat, go ahead.
That's okay. I was on the Downtown Buildings Committee. When I was on the committee, this was like 2 years ago, one of the council members suggested that I go and talk to the Sorensens because we on the committee were proposing some changes to the process of planning and development. Two of our key recommendations, which have still not been implemented, were a checklist to ensure that developers were following the downtown design guidelines and a template for staff reports to ensure that all projects would be treated equitably. When I met with Ted and Jerry, I was surprised and pleased to see that they already had a checklist that they did all by themselves, and they used it. And I think their building is about the most villagey thing I've seen in any of the buildings that have been put up downtown in the last many years. As for story poles, one of the things that we recommended also in the DBC was that because it's very difficult to visualize for people, stories or height or however we define a building, that we should have 3D modeling for when we want to propose something. And I think that's what these guys have showed us, a 3D flyover. So story poles maybe are helpful, but this is much more important. And I also would say that my reading of the story pole code says that Mr. Biggs and the Planning Commission have the option of saying we don't have to have the story poles or not, so that's alterable. But in any case, that was one of our recommendations for this kind of 3D modeling. I'm confused about the confusion. When I read the staff report, I hope you have read my 3-page response to the staff report. It's 38 feet to the top of the parapet. That's code. 3 stories are not new on the corner. The hotel is 3 stories. Offices will put more feet on the street. As for parking, just about every project we've ever done has had a parking exception. And so I'm not sure how all of a sudden now we're saying that the Paseo is not worth this parking. So let's just please approve it and get it built. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. So next is Mike Connor, followed by Francis Murray, and then Jim Wing.
My name is Mike Connor, and my wife and I moved here in 1985. We lived down in Suffolk Court in the South Part. Before then, I actually, in 1977, 78, was a teacher and a coach at Los Altos High School before I got into the real estate business. But I'm going to take a little different look at this. I'm sure that all of us that have been here long enough remember coming in off of Foothill Expressway, where the entrance to our city was a lumberyard. And we enhanced that by building a 2-story building, but we didn't stop there. The new building that the Corrigans are building there is a real statement for the entrance to our city. It seems like Los Altos has prided itself on not just improving, but continuing to improve and reaching into the future to make sure we're keeping step. The same thing, I remember coming in and buying chicken at Kentucky Fried Chicken at Main Street. Let's think about it. The entrance now is so much better than that. Now, you look at 4 Main Street, and you look at the hotel, nice entrance. I remember when Mariani built 4 Main Street. It's a beautiful building. The interiors are beautiful. But let's continue that process of maintaining the progressive nature of Los Altos and continually striving to improve. As a commercial real estate broker, I am well aware of the demand for wealth management people and venture capitalists that currently we're losing. Our town is losing to downtown Palo Alto, downtown Mountain View, even downtown Redwood City now in Sand Hill Road. And I'm not suggesting that we try to be like those cities in any respect, but we shouldn't completely deny our opportunity to attract those people so that they can serve our community. I think that when you measure this building in terms of its style, its size, and its scope, it really fits our village and enhances the one of the main entrances to our village. And as a Los Altos resident for a long time, we just did an expensive remodel in our house. I plan on being here until they have to carry me out feet first. I would be very proud to have this building in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Francis Murray, followed by Jim Wing, and then Michael Hoodnall, perhaps.
My name is Francis Murray, longtime resident of Los Altos. I want to agree with everybody that has supported this plan. My wife and I talked about it extensively. We think it's an important project, especially with a declining retail business. I think it adds a lot. I think this is an example of why they have exceptions, and you can get past it. I understand there's some little issues, but I think this project is very important, and we really think it's important to include the parking changes, and we really think it's important to get this done soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Wing, followed by Michael Hoodnall and Bart Nelson.
I'm Jim Wing. I live on Milverton Road. I would like to ask you to have the environmental study revised. The transportation section does not include the requirements that are by current law based on the California Environmental Quality Act. And also, too, in the data used is data which is almost 6 years old. June 16th, 2011 was when Planning Commission reviewed this data, and they uncovered some discrepancies in the level of service data. And the traffic engineer could not explain those, and so therefore he did state to them that the traffic analysis program that he's required to use for this calculating the level of service data may not be appropriate for Los Altos. And since then, many other agencies have upgraded away from that. So therefore, that data needs to be reviewed and updated, and to where you do have a good set of data, so when you look at the mitigated negative declaration, you have good data to go on. I do not feel that the Paseo is a paseo that residents will use. I walk this very often, 3 or 4 times a week. The shoppers on Main use Wells Fargo because the crosswalks on Main and State lead right to it. And by the way, if my memory serves me right, going back many years, there are easements on that driveway when that building was built. Also, the residents or the shoppers on State, they use 4th Street to get to Plaza 10. So I don't feel that it truly is a public benefit, because I don't really think people will really use it at all. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Jim. Okay, Michael Hoodnall, please correct my pronunciation, followed by Bart Nelson, then Andrea Eaton.
It's Hudnall, Michael Hudnall. I live on View Street. Lived there for many years with my family who's here. We're very concerned about the parking waiver that's being requested in connection with this project. We're worried about parking overflow into our neighborhood and cut through traffic. We're the only single-family residential neighborhood that isn't separated from the downtown triangle by a large, fully trafficked street or by an expressway. We're basically 20 paces off of this parking lot. So anything that happens on this parking lot has the potential to cause our street to become like streets in Palo Alto and Mountain View that are adjacent to the downtowns in those cities. And you all know what kinds of continuing problems those councils are facing about that kind of parking and cut through. So we're very concerned about the waiver. And we're particularly concerned because of other things that are going on downtown. We think there's a potential cumulative impact coming from the First Street office project and this project and the study that's going on of future uses of the downtown. And we'd like to see a comprehensive analysis of cut-through traffic and overflow parking and how to protect our neighborhood from those things. So that's our position. We think that the public benefit of a paseo is not sufficient to grant that waiver, and we hope that you don't grant it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bart Nelson, followed by Andrea Eaton, and then Chan, maybe? Chan? Sorry, Chan. Well, I don't know. Okay.
Thank
All right.
you. Bart Nelson, longtime resident of Los Altos on Blue Oak Lane currently. It appears to me that there are three basic issues. One is the rear setback, the height issue, and parking. The previous speaker talks about parking issues not being pretty important. I couldn't agree with him more. But I need to let you know that solutions to parking downtown have already been presented a year or so ago by the Parking Committee, and I strongly encourage this project to be a pilot project of those recommendations. Parking can be mitigated. To be able to find 29 parking stalls just by redoing parking lot 10 is amazing when you think of it. I know that Bill Maston also did in the Parking Committee a proposal on parking lot 8. And if you're not familiar with that, please dig into that and see. The city has all the data in front of it. We just need, as community members, action. Now, this particular proposal in front of you has been working on this for, I heard, 90 some odd months. Amazing, isn't it? That any council, any Planning and Transportation Committee can't work with a property owner to get something done in a reasonable amount of time. I'm concerned about Los Altos not being able to work with property owners, be they residential or commercial, to turn around a project in a reasonable amount of time. The rear setback was one of the items, and I think that can be mitigated using the property owner's recommendations. The height issue, I think there's some confusion even among your group. So let's work to get this done timely. Let's use the parking opportunity on parking lot 7 to be a pilot project that actually gets something done and shows our community that our council and our commissions can work together for solutions. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrea Eaton, Tan Chen, and then Amy Gatney.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Eaton, and I live downtown. I've been here 10 years. When I first clicked on staff report and read it, I was absolutely shocked. I mean, it is so negative. That's why we don't have more Class A office, a reason. To have a project have to try to get approvals over 5 or 6 years is appalling. So I'm very sorry that we have seen ourselves in that situation. I started to go through the staff report and the village downtown design guidelines and so on, and I thought, well, that's going to be a long exercise in nitpicking, and you all have staff to do that. I am concerned about what feels to me, I followed this project all these years, like there's a need to help our development projects and not just find all the things wrong with it. I'm concerned about all the many projects in our town that have gotten a waiver for one reason or another, and somehow that's not possible with this one, so it feels very inconsistent. As far as the parking goes, I think the restriping is a terrific idea, and I hope that you can find a way to make that possible. I very much support the project. I am concerned about some of the things, like in the staff report for this, it's relating the proposal to those little 2-story or 1-story buildings next to it, whereas it really, in my opinion, relates to the hotel and 4 Main. So there's some things in the report of that type that did bother me. That's it.
Thank you. All right, Tan Chen, and please. Okay, thank you. Amy Galtney, and then Alex Glue.
Hi, my name is Tan Chao, and I am a dentist right next on 80 Main Street, and I've been in practice there for 10 years. I have seen a lot of changes in Los Altos, and I see a lot of changes for the good of the city. And big buildings, high-rise, what does that make Los Altos successful? Because you bring more client foot traffics. But the downfall, the city make it so difficult that a lot of, if you walk around this downtown Los Altos, how many turnover empty business? There are about, you count it between 5 to 8 turnover rapidly every year because we don't have access to good foot traffic in there. So by approving this 40-man building here, it will help the city itself to bring more client, more business, more revenue to the city, and not just that, also the resident around it to make things better. In terms of parking issue, because I've been there for 10 years, I don't think parking is an issue. There's only a certain peak hours that is an issue. However, there are some employees from other side of the building are parked in that area that take away count each day about 10 to 15 spots that have been occupied by the other side of the street, whereas the other side of the street have plenty ample of parking. If you take that moment and look at it and evaluate it, if you restricted those people, employees, park on that side and employees park on this side, you have plenty of space to work with. And that's I don't think that parking is an issue. However, I'm in favor to support that, and I hope the city approve it.
Thank you. Amy, followed by Alex Glue, and then David Dupereau. Is there no, did we lose Amy Galtney? All right. Alex, followed by David Dupereau, and then Wyatt Allen.
Greetings, Chairman Meadows, Commissioner, Mr. Biggs. My name is Alex Glue. I'm a resident of Los Altos, also a chair of the Design Review Commission. I think this...
But you're representing yourself
I'm
tonight.
representing myself, yes. Although I think we would probably pass that building in DRC. I think this building's scale is appropriate. It's consistent with the beautiful Enchante Boutique Hotel across the street. It does make a nice part of the entrance to the city. If you look at it, I think the 3D renderings and the flybys, it's beautiful work, and it gives you quite a bit of information to help make your recommendation to the council. My house is 33 feet tall. Ironically, my house is too big to be on Main Street. Somehow, either the rules or the interpretation of the rules have become absurd. That my house is too big to be on Main Street. Like, we must live in a really small town. Parking, we all know, is basically unusable, unenforceable, the rules, that is. It makes development non-competitive and not fair. That is something truly that your commission should take up and try to solve, maybe not necessarily as part of this project, but it's a big problem, and it's killing development in the city. If you look at the Paseo at $20 million an acre, that Paseo is probably at least worth $500,000 in real estate and would buy 12 underground parking spots. That should be counted toward what they do, too. There's a lot of ways to look at these problems and, put on your thinking caps and figure out what our city needs, because you're here to help develop the city. We need Class A office space. I work in Los Altos. I live in Los Altos, but of course I don't work here. There's very little office space. The Hatfield and McCoys on Main Street need to stop. We need to, kind of bury this and move on and heal the community. Restriping is a great solution. If you give me the paint, I'll put the first stripe down. And, if Maltby's in Main Street went out of business, that end of the street's dead.
Okay, thank you. David Dupereau, Wyatt Allen, and then David Rock.
Yes, Madam Chairman, you got that right. Dupereau, that's me. And I appreciate the opportunity to address the commissioners today.
And please stay close to the mic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My wife and I moved to the community 30 years ago. We raised our family here, and it is a great place. We bought our home that we live in now just near my friend Jim Wing, just down the street on Milverton 24 years ago, and just around the corner from Jerry Sorensen, who I think has, of all the volunteers who've given so much to this community, I think Jerry stands out over these years. And so, anyway, I really want to talk about the public benefit, though, because I think we're talking about apples and oranges here. You can talk about a shortcut like the one through the parking lot at Wells Fargo. I was there, I banked there for 30 years at that branch. And there's a lot of traffic through there. I rode my bike downtown just a few days ago, and I almost got killed by someone plowing through the wrong way. They're going the wrong, it's a one-way parking lot at Wells. They're going the wrong way, and they almost hit me. And that's not satisfactory. This Paseo is something completely different and way better. It's a real public benefit. It's a plaza. We don't have, Mr. Big showed a bunch of blue bubbles on the screen of conceptual public spaces. That's great for concept. I hope we build all of them. I hope we build more. I hope we build a green on First Street. But we don't have them yet. This is real. This is going to happen, and it's going to be a place we all want to be. You can sit down on a bench. There's going to be shade from the sun. There's going to be landscaping and beautiful green. We can have cascading greenery. We can have ivy. We can have public art, something near to my heart. I really think that the murals and the sculptures downtown really make a difference and make it an attractive place to be. So if we think of this Paseo as a public plaza, I don't know much about architecture, but traveling around the world, public spaces are really important. The cities that have them and where they're attractive and inviting, those are the cities you want to be in. So I think that to compare a shortcut through a parking lot to a plaza is just not a comparison. That's a real benefit. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, but I do want to thank you for your service. I think that your volunteering and putting in all your time on this evening and taking a lot of heat from a lot of people is something really to be applauded, and I thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Wyatt Allen, followed by David Rock and Mark Rogie.
Thank you. I'm not going to follow my notes because it was a 3-minute presentation. We only have 2. So I'm an interloper. I live in Mountain View, but I worked 20 years downtown in the Triangle as a banker. I come down for banking, financial advice, cleaners, hardware, all the time. We have an issue with parking, but it's very minor from my experience. And what I'm looking at is I'm hoping you might consider public benefit not just to be the Paseo, which I have a little word on that, but also the revamped Parking Plaza 10. We talked about safety issues one person had. I'm looking at additional parking places to help mitigate maybe for the counseling. I'm looking at a building that's very attractive. It's sizable, but it's not enormous. It is designed to be attractive and give a village ambiance. I, too, feel that stucco is reasonable, but if we need to go beyond that, that's all right. Before arriving here, I was part of Wells Fargo, and I know that we had issues with pedestrians getting hit in that driveway because drivers don't know that there's a right-of-way. And sometimes today it's even worse because people are preoccupied and they're in a hurry. And so I'm worried that we need the Paseo, but we also need the additional parking. I think the use is very appropriate down there because retail has always been a struggle. I was 20 years with the Chamber and Merchant Association. Retail has often suffered down there, but services would be good. Office space is good. The people in those offices will be using the goods and services downtown as well. So I encourage the project to be considered in a very positive way, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. David Rock, then Mark Rogie and Abby Aarons.
Good evening. David Rock, 150 University. Tagging on to the comments just made about the parking, the current lot has 87 spaces. Of the 87, 10 of them are less than 8.5 feet. Another 27 are 8.75 feet. Every town from Los Gatos to Burlingame, except for one, has parking stalls of basically, with very minor exceptions, 8.5 feet. There's zero reason not to restripe to 8.5 feet. I applaud the applicant for being willing to do that at the applicant's expense. That would increase the parking stalls from 87 to 107. There's also 19 spaces currently on street. If you simply, as suggested by the Downtown Parking Committee, If you simply move the parking from the north side to the south side of 4th Street, you go from 5 to 9 stalls right there. You can increase another 19 to 22 stalls just by working on the on-street stalls. Number two, the building itself is actually would be about the most villagey building on Main Street, except for possibly on Enchante. It meets 23 of the 24 downtown design guidelines. It's something that it just sort of got swept under the rug 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know why it's never been brought up. I don't know why we bother to have downtown design guidelines if we don't follow them. Number three, with all due respect to John and his staff, if you look at page 8 regarding the heights and setbacks, it says setting a 3-story building in the middle of a 1-story and a 2-story building is not developing a building that is keeping with the scale of the surroundings. Why in the world are we focusing on stories? The public, if there's an issue with the public looking at stories, we went through a year of the Downtown Building Committee talking about height. Safeway is a 1-story building. If you count the garage, it's actually a 2-story building. It's about 44 feet. 400 Main Street is only 2 stories. It's a big block of 2 stories, as we've elaborated on infinitum at these meetings, and that's about 47 feet. 4 Main Street is actually 35 feet. What the Sorensens have proposed here, the applicant, is I believe it's 38 feet. The obsession with what's inside the interior of a building baffles me. It's not done in cities throughout the Bay Area. It's not done in cities throughout the country. We're talking about height. We're talking about parapet height. We're not talking about if it happens to be 1, 2, or 3 stories. Number 4, we desperately need Class A office buildings in downtown. I'm a commercial real estate broker. I make money when people go out of business and I have to release them. I'm doing all right because all the retail is going out of business. Contrary to the mythology presented by detractors, I don't develop buildings. What we need is office buildings. I have tons of requests to put office in downtown Los Altos. Can't fill it. We don't have any vacancy. We don't have any availability. So for every possible reason, this project should be approved.
Thank you. Okay, Mark Rogie, followed by Abby Aarons, and then Catherine O'Toole.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. My name is Mark Rogie, and I'm a retired city engineer. I read all the documents, and after reviewing all of that, I have to be in support of this. This project supports the existing downtown retail and restaurants, and that's very important. We need more office space downtown walkable area. It provides customers without additional parking demand or additional traffic. The office workers walk downtown to go to lunch. And if they don't walk down, and when they do that, they don't have to have another parking space to do that. That's what shared parking is all about. If they leave to go to lunch, then they've freed up a shared parking space for others to come in. So this is the kind of balance you want in your downtown that makes the vitality of the downtown. This really fits this particular site. It's next to a 3-story hotel, and it's next to a 3-story office building. Now, you can put an office building 1 story underground. It's still a 3-story office building. It still requires the same parking demand. So this is the exact location for this type of building. It may not be right someplace else in downtown Los Altos, but at this particular location, this is a project that really fits. The architectural detailing and the paseo are absolutely sufficient public benefit to approve this project and the exceptions that are requested. This building really embraces the architectural guidelines, and it really embraces the village character of the town. This property is also in the original parking district. They already provided parking. That was being in the original parking district. We've approved projects that aren't in the parking district that impact the parking plazas. This one should benefit from the parking plazas because it paid for it. And by the way, these developers are not some out-of-town developers. They're local residents that have been here a long time and will continue to be here a long time. This project is the right mix, and this is the right time to approve this project as proposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Abby, then Catherine O'Toole, and John Baer. Yes.
So Abigail Aarons, and I'm going to play Dear Abby. It's hard to sit here
and hear how mistreated developers are. When developers refuse to make any changes or refuse to listen, yeah, we can get beat up. I certainly have experienced a bit of that. So I'm here for several reasons. One, I absolutely love that this is not a sloped roof. I think we've got enough sloped roofs at the entry. I'd like to make some clarifications and go on record with this. The hotel, by dimensions and height, is a 2-story building. It got no exceptions. The only reason it works is that we have 8-foot ceiling floors and 9, not 14 and 12. If it looks like the hotel is tipping, you're right. I want you to know that my housekeeping staff stands completely up and your footsteps on the sidewalk are at their head. There is such difference between San Antonio Road and Main Street that building sits several feet higher on the Main Street side, a lot of feet lower on the San Antonio side. That building gives this community $1 million every 4 to 5 years and a community plaza. I think we need to take to heart some of the offerings going on. I love that these guys are willing to look at the parking on Plaza 10. Unlike all the naysayers, you find maybe 3 cars on Main Street at 9 in the morning, and we're 100% full. The people who come to the hotel during the week are business people. They don't drive there. They're vanned or Ubered. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Okay, Catherine O'Toole, followed by John Baer, and then our final speaker will be Scott Atkinson.
Good evening, and thank you, Commissioners. I'm Catherine O'Toole, and I was born and raised in Los Altos when there was a train running through it. I was also a public school teacher here. I'm here in support of the plan for 40 Main Street. I'm currently the librarian at 60 Main Street, which is right next door to 40 Main Street. So while I support the architecture, I think it looks attractive for the improvements that have begun at the Gateway. I really want to talk about the Paseo, because I have to walk from parking lot 10 through the little private. I want to really stress that the Paseo that exists between 40 Main Street and, 60 Main Street and 80 Main Street is a private Paseo, and it's very narrow. So when there is a congregation of people talking on that little tiny sidewalk, I can't pass. So I have to go around the Wells Fargo entrance to 60 Main Street. And the Wells Fargo Paseo, if that is a Paseo, is really a driveway, and it's unacceptable. So I really like the Paseo design of 40 Main Street because it's broader and it connects the parking lot to Main Street. I just think it's very attractive and very smart. I think the size and scale, even though 60 Main Street is a tiny little one-story building right next door to 40, I think the size and scale are appropriate given the size and scale of the surrounding buildings. And I just want to comment that Frank Lloyd Wright was solicited, his advice was solicited in the 1950s by the city council at the time, and he recommended high density for Los Altos and was roundly denied.
All right. John Baer, and then our final speaker will be Scott Atkinson.
Like many of the speakers, I want more Class A office buildings in Los Altos, but I don't want this project. And by the way, code-compliant projects do not take 8 years, and I served 9 years on the Planning Commission, and I know that for a fact. So what's wrong with this project? It lacks architectural integrity. It's material choice, cheap materials. height and setback. And by the way, you got that architectural integrity and materials from not residents, but from a professional. It's not a paseo, it's an alleyway. It's too narrow, it's too low, it's got an overhang. We're talking about parking. It's not 29 spots, it's 43 spots that have to be served by the parking plaza for this building. That's what has to be required. It's 29 that they need to supply. The reality is that 29 spots are worth between $1.5 million and $3 million, depending on how you price that out. The question is the paseo worth it? I don't think so. Restriping benefit? Who gets the benefit? The parking plaza is designed so that 100% of FAR throughout the district is available to people for redevelopment. So any redevelopment, any restriping really needs to go for two things. One is the growth in demand in our downtown in general, and for the other people in the district who are going to increase to their 100% FAR. That's an important note here. Second and third stories, if they're allowed, in fact, need to supply the parking. That's a requirement. And this building is way over height, way over its setback requirements, too big in the wrong place. Please recommend denial. Thank you.
Okay, and our final speaker is Scott Atkinson. And then just for those of you who are wondering, we'll be taking a bathroom break very soon.
I would echo everything that the immediately previous speaker just said and support that. New building is good. We do want that. But the community standards and costs were known when this building was purchased. Even investors were told that they would make 100% profit, even under the then existing code. And as far as a checklist and timing, never one time has a fully compliant proposal been submitted in the last 8 years. And that's the real challenge here. It's certainly understandable to try to increase profits, to maximize space, and do these other things, but at what cost? And should the community foot that bill for either whether it be a math error or greed, or whether it just be wanting to have more space in downtown? Those are all interesting reasons, but for the community to do that, it has to be a minor variance, and it needs to have an equivalent cost benefit. Taking away 29 stalls from the existing parking space, I don't think justifies that. It's a short block of maybe 4 or 5 buildings. There's another street around that segment as well. And so both 3 different things that we're giving up by doing that, the height and the setbacks and the parking, giving all those things up, I don't think justifies that. So I also, with regard to parking, horizontal parking is very difficult. We have all probably been in a parking lot accident and had some dings and have insurance claim because of that. You narrow spaces, you come out differently. It is very difficult, and I don't think that's a real easy way, particularly for Los Altans, to work through that. So, and that is not on the proposal, by the way, although it's been kind of offered on the side. So I encourage you to deny this application.
All right, perfect timing. So I have no further speaker cards, so I am going to close the public comment. All right, so with that, we're going to take let's call it 7-minute break, and commissioners get dibs on the restrooms. Actually, I don't need to go. But thank you. Yeah, I know.
That's all I want to be able to clarify.
Okay, so we're going to try to reconvene. Bang, bang. Ooh.
Doesn't it make you feel good?
That was firm, yes. It's my firmest gavel yet. That's right. Okay, we're going to reconvene now. So if all conversations would cease. Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to discuss here at the commission where we feel we are. I think we started this discussion and we had some uncertainties. So let's find out where my fellow commissioners think we are, and all of our microphones are off except mine. So if you're going to say something, please turn it back on, and let's see where we stand.
Well, you know where I stand. I stand that we should continue this until we have many of the clarifications that were brought up in hand, including, at the very least, if not full story polls, a designation on the documents that come to us that relate to where the story polls are representing, so that we and the public are on the same page. And if there are other things that were discussed as to accuracy, I think it'd be good to give Bill and the applicant a chance to be really accurate of what are they actually asking for. And something that I think we talked about here in commission was that one of the things that would make our life easier from a staffing point of view is if when staff, in addition to listing the application's exceptions requested, also provided on the document some relative visual. So we could say, if this building up came and was completely compliant, this is where it would be on this drawing. So that when it goes out on the website, people, again, I'm looking for the kind of clarity that would allow someone coming in off from their bedroom looking at the website or walking down the street to have a sense of what they're actually getting. And if we had a complete application, I would be willing to discuss this.
So I'll interject about the story polls in particular, because I think that the information that we received after the concern was raised alleviated it for me. I think what the advice that we got from council was to consider what is precedent in our town, and the example that came before us on El Camino reflects that our precedent is not to have a strict application of the story polls. So to now apply it where we have been informed that 3 companies, and I'm going to presume reputable companies, who provide this kind of service have said it cannot be done in the manner that we require it, then in my mind the next point that we have to consider is what are we trying to accomplish with the story polls, and do we accomplish that in another mechanism? And as Anita said, the backup, the fallback to the story polls is these 3D renderings, which we have before us, and I think they do give us the impressions when we don't have the story polls, or they cannot be done. So as far as the story polls, I think the precedent is not doing it, and we have alternatives to demonstrate it, massing and scale, that I think are sufficient.
I'd like to concur with what Phoebe had to say. I'm concerned with respect to the story poles that the plan diagram that's in front of the building, I don't believe that where the poles are actually placed is the same as what's on that diagram. I think the diagram is what you would have wanted to do, but then they don't mesh. And what I recall with 4880 is that we had a rendering and it was drawn in red where the story poles were and what they represented, so that it was really easy, if you took the time, it was really easy to tell what the story poles, how they fit with the actual building. And you can't do that when the poles are just on a plan diagram. So for the sake of the public, I think we ought to fix that. The other big ask for me, in agreeing with what Phoebe said, is this parking proposal. This is something that I think landed on us by surprise tonight. And I think we need to have a little more time, and that ought to come through whatever staff review is appropriate, because it wasn't certainly mentioned that I saw in the staff report unless I missed something.
Oh, I don't think it was part of the application.
No, that's what I asked. I said, is there a parking restriping proposal here? And John said no. But then Mr. Maston said that the applicant would be willing to.
So that's twice I'm confused tonight. But,
Right.
I'm the new kid, so who knows?
No, well, that's.
I'm not suggesting we make a determination today or a final conclusion, but I think we can start the conversation, because to tell the applicant, go and put together a parking proposal like the one you've described, and then come back and have them hear from, let's say, hypothetically, we then talk about it for the first time, and we all say, this is not a public benefit. We don't consider additional parking something that we would consider as a value in exchange for a deficiency. Well, then we've punted. So we don't have to make the final determination, but we can at least start the conversation so they have guidance and know what we want them to do, what we want to see in that.
I agree. I think the parking has to be included in the application in order to be studied. And so I really like to see that happen. I agree with Ronit that I don't need to see. I already saw a couple of posts as I arrived today, but I didn't see them yesterday, I don't think. I think they just came in, the posts. So I think we need adequate time to go back and look. I wish I had time. I was rushing to get here to go and see what's up, and I don't know if they're exactly the height or where they are, but I do like to have a little more time to review what's there, the story poles that's there, and if there can be more information, that'd be helpful. So more time.
Again, for me, I mean, we just
You got it.
sat here and listened to the public, and I think the public's here, and they just, I mean, from my perspective, we should at least have the discussion so the public knows where we're coming from, so the applicant knows where we're coming from, and,
And what we're looking for.
and what we're looking for, and so to provide guidance, really.
Okay. So what I saw in staff report is that they're looking for recommendations in 4 areas. Those areas were essentially there's a proposed mitigated negative declaration on the environmental impact report. They were looking for some design feedback, looking for a use permit, and then looking to see whether the exceptions were warranted based on public benefit. Do I summarize that, John? Yes. Okay. So again, if we're requiring additional information to come back for clarity's sake, then we can't necessarily, vote yay or nay on any or all of these. But I think we can probably give guidance. Some of them. I think public benefit versus the exceptions may be the most contingent because we'll need to see what this parking proposal looks like. But I'm prepared at least on, talking about the environmental impact and the use. I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel, but I think we can at least discuss some of those elements of the 4 questions we were being asked tonight. Does anyone agree or does everyone disagree?
Yes,
I
we agree.
Agree. Okay. So then, so who would like to start and give either guidance or, some general impression regarding whether you support the proposed mitigated negative declaration on the environmental impact? And actually, the attorney looks like she's going to say something.
I'm so sorry. I do hate to interrupt you, but I did just want to point out before you began your discussion that when staff receives an updated parking proposal, then a determination will be made as to how the environmental review may need to be tweaked to accurately and adequately address that. I'm not saying that it will have to have a big change. I simply don't know because I don't know what the proposal will look like. So I just want you to keep that in mind as you have your discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Changes may be necessary. We won't know until we see.
Okay. So is it okay to couch it from what we have seen, or should we just hold off on that until the changes? I mean, because there's no sense in, again, I don't know that we're expecting major changes anyway, but what do you recommend? Should we just not go there then?
Well, I would say that there are still definitely aspects of the mitigated neg deck that you have in front of you that won't necessarily change as a result of changed parking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were inclined to discuss those, that may not change at all. But I just, especially if you're going to get into transportation, circulation, any of those issues, I wanted to point out the obvious and say that may be subject to change.
All right.
Can I ask a question of staff? And I kind of alluded to this 2 weeks ago when we looked at this. Have we had this kind of study for any of the buildings done in the last 5 years? Which is kind of my frame of reference from Downtown Buildings Committee.
Well, I know this is the only one that's been done in the last year and some odd months. Last 5 years, I would have to do a little bit of research. I don't
Abby's
recall
left,
if
so
some of the
ask her if
larger projects on First Street required initial studies or not. I'd have to look into that.
All right. So does anyone care to make some comments on design or the use permit? Any guidance there for applicant? Or maybe we're not.
I haven't heard anybody comment negatively about the proposed office use. So that to me is kind of a no-brainer at this point.
I think even the folks who are opposed would like to see more office space.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, in my mind, is a universal desire.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That one's maybe that one we can
Maybe that one we
can
do.
Yes.
And
Good start.
Does anyone disagree? No. Okay. So we're giving you strong feedback that the use, office space use, is a go from what we see today. That's the caveat for everything we're going to say. Then the next one may be on design. Would that be, or do you, or, I mean, if you don't want to go through this, we can just say, never mind, we'll wait till we get everything. But I think we've really hashed out quite a bit, so.
I don't think the design is going to change
Right.
after they put story poles.
Exactly. So that's why I'd like to give some feedback now.
Well, I thought it was interesting, Abby's point. Abby's point was that she was able to build a building that had no exceptions. And granted, things are very fluid in our town relative to zoning, but she was able to weave her way through. And her building has very distinctive architecture, which is very typical of Abigail construction and development. I have a lot of problem with the materials. I think that the rhythm of having the 25-foot module is well affected, but I have a problem with, it feels to me a lot like a pastiche and less like a coherent architectural design. And that's a matter of my architectural opinion. As for high-quality materials, which is one of the requirements, I have no problem with stucco if it's well detailed. Mostly I have a problem with the mass and bulk of this. if I put my hand on the elevation and eliminate the third story, I have no problem with this building. For me, the volume of it is extraordinary. And part of that, the architectural design issues, is because it goes to 3 stories. And so I don't know what guidance I could give except to say that I really would like to see Class A office space. I really would like to see it in this location. I would really like to see it fit in, but I think this is the wrong building.
If you
Where are
have,
we going?
well, we're going
Let the
whichever way
architects go
anyone
first.
can jump in.
I can
Go
I
to
can
design,
comment,
yes.
follow up
Yes.
on Phoebe. I actually happen to think a 3-story building works here. And, when I look at the hotel, it looks like a 3-story to me. And, this one, the only problem I have with it is that the 3-story maybe needs to be set back further in. I feel like I realize it's already set back about 6 feet, but maybe, the architect sketches that were provided with the roof, and the dormers, maybe that's the solution. Maybe it's some sort of, a smaller 3rd story, solution with the more open towards the front, more of a setback towards the front. I honestly don't like the tower where it is. I feel like the patio is nice, but it's really cramped in that corner with the 6 feet distance between the next building and the tower. It's if you have 1 or 2 people walking by, you're going to block that view at 6 feet. So, and I think the tower is really meant to, make a statement about a corner that's prominent, maybe across, another cross street, but it's really a tiny little paseo that, the tower is a little overkill for what it is, representing. So I realize it's a nice feature. I just think it's not quite the right place for it. I would prefer to see more open space in front of the building, some sort of plaza or, instead of the tower and the paseo, just some place where it's visible and it's, really a public space. Someone mentioned the public spaces in Europe and, how fun it would be in that paseo. I just feel like it's too narrow for it to be a real public space. And given the size of this lot, I think it really works better in the front. In terms of material, I'm okay with stucco, like Phoebe said, if it's done right. I do agree with the architect who did the study that those pilasters are accentuating the vertical, and that maybe we can come up with more horizontal lines to, not make the building feel as tall, since so many people have problems with the height. So, the balcony on the 2nd floor or some sort of, more horizontal lines will help that. So I think design-wise, that's all I have.
Okay.
All right.
My turn?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. So I don't look at the paseo necessarily as a public benefit. It really, the developer is getting a lot of benefit from having the paseo because it allows for this lobby off of the paseo, which makes the rest of the building more usable. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I mean, I would not want to see, core and elevator and all of that other stuff up front. So I'm just calling it what it is. And so for me, it's important that we maintain, the doors and that vibrancy of fronting Main. But I think what we're missing here is that, and so for me, like the public benefit is this, is the developer saying that they'll step up and pay for this redoing the parking plaza, which I think is huge. And if we look at everything all the parking that's been waived over the years, no one's given up as much as they're willing to do. So I think they should actually be applauded for what they proposed here tonight. And I think a lot of the negative comments, people just came here with these thoughts of opposing the project, and no one took that into consideration. So I, for one, would like to at least acknowledge that, and I think that is, in my mind, a tremendous public benefit. And so, but I do think what we're missing here is that even the current code, or however the code is written, seems like it's 30 feet to the top to the roof, and then 12 to 15 feet, depending on however you're going to do this, 12 to 15 feet of parapet, right? And so from my point of view, what anyone at street level is going to see is either a 42 or a 45-foot building. And whatever happens behind that parapet, so long as you're not looking at all this equipment, from the street, really doesn't matter. And because otherwise we're getting into this whole discussion again about stories versus volume. And if you look at it from that perspective, what they've actually done is the majority of the building is at, call it 37, 38 feet, whatever that is. So they're actually 6 feet below at least 6 feet below where they could be. And so I would view that as another public benefit, or I think that we have a problem with our code, but the way it's written, because I don't think that was necessarily the intent of having a 12-foot wall above a 30-foot structure. That being said, the developer is getting a lot of benefit from the additional story, economic benefit. And just going back to public benefit, I don't think that the Paseo in itself is enough public benefit to offset the economic benefit that they get from the third story. But the third story to me is not offensive, especially in light of the other buildings around it. And so I would want to take advantage of allowing them to have that third story and use up that volume. And I think we can get the parking and the funds to redevelop Plaza 10. To me, that's a great win-win situation. And again, for me, it comes down to what they could actually do is, have this 42-foot or 45-foot wall, and they've actually taken it down for the majority of it, except for this tower. And I think for me, I don't mind the tower, but I could see. I think that's just purely personal preference. I do think I would love to see a little more natural materials and higher quality materials used on the building, as opposed to as much stucco that's on there. But I think overall it's a good looking building, and if you look at it in relation to 4 Main Street, and the fact that it's just a few feet above it, and it's still below the 42 to 45 foot parapet that is in our current zone, in our current zoning guidelines. To me, it's a great win-win situation.
A question just to ask Alex. So if I heard you say something and I'm not quite sure. So if the Paseo is not sufficient to offset the benefit, but the benefit that you're looking at is if Parking 10 were redeveloped as part of this project, so there was an increase in parking, I would infer from that that if they don't provide some parking, that that's not acceptable. Is that a fair inference?
Yeah, it would be more, I think, yes. I think for me, we should be getting more, the city should be getting more benefit than solely the Paseo. And so I would be in favor of the project if we were to get a public benefit, and that public benefit for me is the dollars to redo the parking and get more additional parking.
Okay.
Ronit?
Sure. Okay. So I'll talk about the design first, and then I'll talk about public benefit. So in my mind, we talk a lot about what is, the gateway to our building, and what someone said today I thought was right, that really no individual building is a gateway. It's an impression that you get from different angles. And the impression that you get from the angle that this building will be a combination of really those three buildings. It's the hotel, it's the Packard building, and it's going to be the new 40 Main. So I agree that the comparison to the single-story decrepit building next door is not what we are going to be aspiring to or building to, but really what we imagine will come once the ability to resolve issues on that street will allow. So I think that it is. I think it's proportional to what is there. I have no problem with a third story. I kind of feel like that ship sort of has sailed in my mind. We just had the First Street project come before us, and like 70 people wrote, and 85% of those people all advocated for allowing 3 stories in our downtown. So in my mind, that not only is there precedent, I see Abby's building as a 3-story. So I think there's also precedent for that, and also just general support for that direction. So in terms of the features, I do like the tower. I agree that I think stucco is a better solution than the wood siding, certainly. I think that it would have benefit. I think it would also benefit from what Alex is saying, is more natural material and higher quality material. I would have liked to see what Bill's touches on the building would have looked like. I think it may have softened it. And when I look at it, it reads to me like these horizontal, lines. And I actually liked the description that you gave, where you said, you can create these sort of little, give the impression of smaller mass, break up the mass by making it feel like separate components. And I think that more can be done to accomplish that. And that's we're talking about detail and material. For me, it's not massing. It's not size or dimensions or proportion. I don't have any instruction to change that, but I would soften up the building to give it a more elegant appearance. And I find it interesting and troublesome, the peer review that we did. Either we should do it for every building that comes before us, or we shouldn't do it. It shouldn't be just for the buildings that staff doesn't like the appearance of, because we just had the First Street Green building come up, and for some that was maybe a controversial architecture. The vast majority actually liked it, but they didn't get any peer review. No one compared their architect to anybody else. So we should be consistent in how we treat people, in my view.
Though technically that wasn't an application. That was a study session.
True. So it'll be interesting to see if we do hire this other architect to review a award-winning architect that has already built in our town and is considered super well regarded. I hope we don't, actually. I hope we don't. That wouldn't, I don't think, be a good use of our funds. So I think we do need clarity on the height of that roof and the parapet, because the goal of the parapet is to hide hide the equipment behind it, which I think probably by the placement and the fact that there's a building here is actually going to be accomplished regardless of the height of the parapet, even if it's teeny tiny. But so those are my comments about the architecture. I think it can be refined and even better. And you know, because we're looking at 2013 documents, plans that that I've reviewed in 2013, they all look different. There are improvements that can be made over time and should be made. So then, looking at the Paseo, I do see that as a public benefit, and this brings me back to I'm a broken record on this issue, because we went to City Council and we said we need to articulate what public benefits are. And in order for there to really be transparency and clear expectations, we need to articulate what we think are public benefits. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. Other towns have done it. So you can say a Paseo is actually a public benefit if it has these features. Parking is a public benefit, and a whole host of other issues, so that people don't have to guess. Because sometimes benefits don't feel so beneficial. And what someone says is a benefit isn't always for everyone else. And I'll say that the Paseo, the first time that this was heard, the numbers were different in terms of the deficiency. So what the credit that they were getting, or what the Planning Commission approved for a variance in exchange for the Paseo, has shifted. I think the appetite has diminished probably for Paseos since we have now gotten other benefits. So I do recognize it as a benefit, but I don't know that it is. I agree, it's not sufficient to alleviate the concerns that people have about parking. And then this parking issue of their offer. In my mind, that has real value. So Paseo, there's probably a way to attribute the value. And when we were talking about the First Street Green and we were talking about the park, I said, you can evaluate it. And someone said it tonight by what's the square foot of what is being given to the city. And that has a monetary value. So you can assign a value to it. And then in terms of parking, I think it's incredibly hard to figure how much of a public benefit we need in exchange for this, because it's not clear to me that the number deficiency is really nailed down. There have been so many different ways of calculating either the credit that an applicant gets or the deficiency or the need, and then there is so much coming down the pipeline in terms of possible changes that we may apply requirements that will literally be the last time they get, applied to an applicant, but we have to. So I think regardless, what they're suggesting, whether it's 16 or 25 spaces or 28 and 30 spaces if they do the street too, that covers every type of calculation. And parking is a need. I think the folks for and against sort of articulated different expressions. There was the individual, the therapist, who said, it's horrific and it's devastating in our town. And then there's the other who said there's no parking issue. So I'm in the middle somewhere. I don't think the sky is falling, but I also don't think everything's dandy. But there is room for improvement. So you have to assign a value, right? I don't think it's what John Baer said, where he said 29 spots should cost between 1.5 and 3 million. That means at 1.5, that's $51,000 a spot. At 3 million, that's $103,000 a spot. So that parking spot better come with a car. If we're making an applicant pay that much, we've never made an applicant pay that much. That would be so onerous and just disproportionate with all reality. So, but there is a value, and I think that replacing spots in the lot behind is a true public benefit. Everyone says that parking has value and it's a benefit, and we just said that in the First Street Green. So there's no question that parking is a public benefit. I agree with what Bart said. There has to be a solution, right? That we can't simply say you're deficient and there's no solution that this town can apply to this problem, because we have done it in every other case. Nobody has been paralyzed in this town like this project has. So what are the solutions? Maybe it's a parking in lieu. Maybe it's coming up with giving them guidance on a public benefit. But it's not just, boom, nothing. Nothing you can do. So I'm optimistic that 96 months isn't going to turn into 120 months, and that this something will get through shortly to City Council. And that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Can I just clarify one thing before? Because I don't know if I misspoke or not. I did not mean to say that the Paseo for me was not a public benefit. I just meant to say that it wasn't enough of a public. Okay.
Right. Yeah, okay. I think that's probably what, okay, Anita? Yeah.
Okay. I defer in large part and agree with the other comments made, because these folks who are architects and do development have a whole lot more expertise on this than I do. I think we're fighting a couple of things. One is that our code says you're supposed to build the building to the sidewalk. And so I don't think that really is a smart thing to do here necessarily, but that's what the code says. So I think that's what we've got, part of what we've got. I'd rather see more articulation at the front end than what we have here. As for the materials, I agree. I'd like to see more natural materials. I personally like stone, but I like stucco. So I'm not allergic to stucco. Just echoing what other people have said here. I'm personally not a fan of towers, and I think in particular because of the way the street curves when you come to this building from southbound on San Antonio, that tower is actually going to stick out like a sore thumb on that bend. And I would encourage the developer, and Bill, I'm happy to give you these. I took pictures. You all know that I'm a big fan of how the eye sees things. And one of the problems with the Google visuals is that they use a wide angle lens. So I took pictures with a 50 millimeter lens, which is what the eye sees. And I took them from a couple of perspectives. One was driving on San Antonio, looking right into town. And another one standing over at the apricot orchard at the crosswalk, getting ready to come across the street. So I was trying to pick realistic viewpoints for both drivers and pedestrians, really looking into the gateway of our town. And I would encourage you to place your building on this kind of a view and bring that back to us and let us look at it. Because I don't find the flyover really to be realistic, to be honest. And certainly very different from the rendering. These look very different from the rendering, and I think would go a long way to compensating for the issues we have with going on with story poles at the moment. I don't know, from gable roofs and all those things, that's all architectural niceties that I just don't feel competent to comment further on. The building seems very massive to me. And I would agree with Phoebe, if this was 2 stories, I'm in like right now, and would see anything we would do about parking to be a terrific thing to do. But if we had 2 stories, we wouldn't, probably have much to talk about. I think there's the possibility that we could mitigate some of the issues with the 3rd story by looking at what was done at 240 2nd or 3rd Street, which is at the Charles Schwab building. That 3rd Street, 243rd Street, where that 3rd story is really set so far back that you just don't see it. I mean, not unless you're way out across the parking lot and you just don't see it. But having this thing come this far forward from where I was standing, and I kind of sketched into my photos, it's really right there. And I think, unlike a couple of my fellow commissioners, I think it is too much and not to scale. And I would remind all of us that after the hotel was built, the city changed the way it measured height so that that hotel is no longer conforming and would not be acceptable under today's code. And although we've had a number of reactions about First Street, which Ronit mentioned, we also got a lot of negative letters. People who went by the story poles and said, "Oh, please don't do this." So I think you've got enough. We've got enough pressure coming from the other side that we really have to look at what we're doing with that third story. With respect to parapets, I believe there was an error. The parapets should still be 8 feet. And when I was on the Downtown Buildings Committee, I had a long discussion with Zach Dahl about parapets, and he said to me exactly what I forget one of you just said, which is that the parapets are really designed as screening mechanisms. They're really not intended to be something that completely wraps a building. And I raised the question of, okay, then why do we have 400 Main? Because that parapet almost completely wraps the building. And I was told, well, that was an integral architectural element. I think that was what I was told. But still in all, I believe parapets are really supposed to be screening mechanisms and do not constitute height that allows us to then build more usable volume. And I think we really should look at using the parapet the way it's intended to screen mechanical from the street and not to do what we've got here. So the question becomes to me, paseos. Let me talk about paseos. I agree a lot with what Alex said, with what Bahi said, with what Ronit said. I view the paseo as having a dual benefit. It obviously benefits the landowner or the building owner and the employees that are come there and other employees that work in that area. But those are also people we care about that are in the city of Los Altos. And so it may not be in a sense as much of a public benefit, but it benefits the people who are in our town and are contributing economically in our town. And although I think it's a little narrow, it's narrow at 6 feet at the narrowest spot, and because of some of the articulations that are in it, especially at the tower, it makes it so narrow that it's not like kind of a welcoming place. It's like, okay, first you go through this skinny place, and then you have a paseo. And on the Downtown Buildings Committee, we looked very hard at 6-foot sidewalks. And 6-foot sidewalk is really the minimum that's recommended now. And so we're looking at a paseo that's really no better than what's supposed to be a minimum sidewalk. So to me, it's not a public space. It's public use, but it's not really a public space. It's not a gathering space. It's not an accumulating space. It's a transit corridor. It's a very attractive transit corridor, although I'm not sure your plants are going to grow because of the angle of setting. I looked carefully at that, and I don't think they get much sun during the day, so you're not going to have... It's a good thing your trees are in pots because you're going to have to replace them a lot, I think. So that said about paseos, I'm flexible about some of that third story if we can get it out of view, much more out of view, and look at what the true parking need would be. I agree with Ronit. I think there's change coming. I think we would all agree it's really unfortunate that we don't have the final parking study, parking committee work approved and integrated into our code so that we have a new set of things to look at, because in the last 10 years, as far as I can tell, none of the projects built in the Downtown Triangle have met the applicable code for parking. We've made an exception for every single one for one reason or another. And I agree, and will echo what many of you said, many of my fellow commissioners said, that the idea of using this as a kind of a pilot to restripe is very appealing, very, very appealing to me. And I'm also a customer of Wells Fargo, and so I see in and out of, although I park in the Wells Fargo parking lot, I do. I am in and out of parking Plaza 10 also, and it's a horrible, horrible flow. And I look forward to getting a really terrific solution for what to do there, and the possibility, as I said, of making it a pilot. So let's see if I skipped anything. I think I'm done.
Okay. So
I just
yeah.
I just wanted to echo, I think that parking is critical to me, and if restriping is the answer, because Ronit's right, if we need to find an answer, let's find an answer, because it has taken a very long time, because I believe the applicant has not been able to show enough of what is required by code or is being asked for by the commission, being asked for from staff. But with that said, there has to be a solution. My concern is that it not be an imaginary one, that parking is really difficult if it's not set up appropriately. And if it was a slam bang, I think the city would have redone their parking lots long ago, because parking's been a complaint for many years, building. The other thing is that if it's going to be restriped, it has to be striped to work, and I believe it has to be done concurrently, because otherwise the need for parking will not be met. I don't think there can be a time lag. If it's going to be part of the proposed public benefit, we should see that as a modified application, and we should see a real demonstration of what's possible, not I think it's 16, I think it's 20. I want to know what it is. I want to know what size it is. And then we have the parking studies, even though they haven't been adopted, as two recommendations for sizes of space that we can work with. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to then go to where I think, I'm not going to repeat everything that I might think, but on the basis of public benefit versus exceptions, I think actually we're probably unanimous that the Paseo by itself is not sufficient. I didn't actually hear anyone say that the Paseo by itself is sufficient. And there was vivid interest in a parking proposal, whether you call it a pilot or to actually demonstrate specific numbers of parking spaces that can be gained as part of the public benefit that you're going to offer. So again, I saw one sheet in the packet, but we need to actually see definition on that public benefit, as everyone has mentioned and Phoebe specifically articulated there. In terms of design, I won't say too much. I, too, am a fan of natural materials and stone. I know there's some stone meant to be on the bottom. I just want to make sure that at least it's there, or maybe more. We don't want to end up with I know this won't be, but we don't want it to look like 400 Main. So the more natural materials you can throw on there, the better. And I do think you've had some advice about mitigating the third story. And again, the public benefit would also mitigate it, but you can do that some design-wise. So I'm not going to belabor. You had quite a few ideas here. I really think we should probably not talk about environmental impact, because then that really will tie in more with some of the details that we get in terms of the public benefit, the parking restriping pilot, or whatever we're going to call it. I do think that, yes, there's history, but and it's not pretty, pretty much any side you look at it. But it's sort of like, the financial theory of, and John, you can spank me if I say this wrong, but, sunk costs. We are where we are today as a whole bunch of dirty laundry at the front end, but we have to work with the code that's there today and try to help you. I just want to make sure you were awake there, John. And so we've got the code, we've got your proposal, we're giving you some feedback, we're giving you a way to help us, help you, and help our town to get this building approved. So hopefully, with the information that we asked for, the details, and then the additional feedback you've gotten, then you can come back with some answers, and we'll be able to move it forward.
I just have a question about process, because I don't think we're going to be designing the parking plaza or having any input into, I don't know, but I would think that's, so I'm wondering if there's a way, and especially given how long it's taken, and whether there's a way to send it up to city council for them to look at it and say, we concur and we believe that, this is a public benefit that we would stand behind. And they can work it out amongst themselves as to whether it's, we'll work with you and you guys agree to pay up to a certain amount or whatever it is beyond that. But it would seem like if we're going to go and have to redesign, design the whole parking thing and figure out how many spots, I wonder, and then come back and then it goes to council and they don't view that as enough public benefit. We've kind of just spun our wheels. So,
on the other hand, I feel we don't have a lot of specificity about whether we're gaining, 2 parking spaces, 9, or is there a minimum that we'd like to see to say that this would be a true public benefit, and say we don't need to see the specifics, but that this public benefit means that you're giving, that there is a net positive of just throwing a number out, 20 parking spaces. Is that, so I guess we could approach it that way, but I don't think if we send something up to council where we just gave design input and, bulk and mass considerations too, so.
Which I think those things, can come back. I'm just wondering if on the
public benefit.
Whether the
Public parking
concept
itself.
okay.
of working out a resolution,
I
and
see.
it doesn't, I mean, the striping is what they have offered, and that seems like a good solution, but, the city has negotiated one-off agreements with different projects, whether it's, as one-off sort of parking in lieu agreements where, Safeway has a deal and Los Altos Grill has a deal. So we have done that where we say, figure out the parking, come up with a solution for these properties that have no alternatives, right? So we've done it. And maybe it's the restriping and we really have them go down that path. But I do think that they should know from city council if that's going to be something that
Or even,
they have an appetite for.
we don't even know if it's viable. The piece that you just asked, Sally, is there a minimum number of spaces? I'm not even going there. What I want to know is but
we haven't
is
seen
it
anything.
viable?
Yeah.
We had a resident say, if you have a certain number of spaces, but every time you back out, you hit the car behind you, that's not viable. And that requires really professional analysis. And at this point, we could look to John Biggs, who could say, and at this moment, our code requires the spaces to be this big. And then I go back to an earlier statement which says we have all these other information pieces that haven't been adopted that said spaces could be smaller. But we can't do that. And so that's where I don't believe we can actually give input because it's above our pay grade.
I think the closest thing we've got is the CDM Smith report that had kind of draft layouts for all the plazas in town. That's the only thing that I would fall back on if I was pressed right now.
But it starts with a proposal by the applicants, and you've heard them stand up at the podium this evening and offer to do something with the parking in Plaza 10. I think this is the opportunity to see if they're willing to move forward with putting pen to paper and developing a plan or writing up a proposal or suggesting a development agreement or providing in lieu parking funds to a certain amount. I think that's the next step on this, is to see where and how the applicant proposes to do these improvements. And then we need to evaluate it from the standpoint of this is a city lot. What agreements do we need to work out between the city and the developer? Does it meet engineering standards? Does it do we need to go back and reevaluate the initial study, the environmental analysis that was done? So,
because we were uniformed that the Paseo by itself is not sufficient public benefit. I don't think so. If we're uniform on that, then whether it turns out that they rethink maybe parking isn't it, they want to throw in some other public benefit. But everyone supports parking, and you guys have talked about parking in the past. So,
well, here's another piece that Anita pointed out. The code requires them to build to the street,
the sidewalk,
to the sidewalk. But if there was another, and Bahi said this, if there was a public plaza, that's a public benefit that would be a potential opportunity for an exception. I mean, there are always lots of choices.
Yeah.
I just don't think we've had official choices that we could actually evaluate.
All we've had is the Paseo officially.
Yes, and the Paseo
I gotta tell
officially
you,
won't
a
fly.
parking solution to me is a whole lot more appealing than a public plaza of some sort, since we technically have one right across the
I
street.
hear you, I hear you. I'm just pointing out.
There's nothing
There's,
here.
there's nothing cast in concrete.
Right.
Yes.
This discussion would be perfect for discuss like public benefits, because we would say, is a plaza a public benefit? Well,
right.
this plaza turned out
Right.
not to be a
Right.
big a benefit, but this one did. And
Yeah.
And why?
And why?
So-
What are the features of
Why
it
it
that make
works.
it the location, the size, the
So I don't think we can float a public benefit to council until we actually see what they're proposing as a public benefit. So there's no way around. I think the best we can do tonight is continue. We've given quite a bit of feedback, and you know where it's clear sailing, and you know where there's some tweaks that you might offer, and let you guys think of an additional public benefit.
I have just one more question, which is more of a straw poll, which I did not verbalize, but I agree with what Anita said and what Bahi said about the tower. I feel that it's an artificial corner that's created as part of the Paseo. And so I believe that there are at least three of us for whom the tower is a problem and a maybe, because Alex said he didn't care one way or the other. So I just thought we should throw that out. If the applicant's going to go back and revise their application, taking to heart some of the other things we talked about, perhaps
one
that might
shy.
be something to look at. Well, and Mike's not here either, so
Right.
we're not a full.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, the only other thing I wanted to say is I met with the applicant.
Let's talk about ex
Yeah,
parte.
we didn't do our disclosure.
No, we didn't do our ex parte. So
I did.
You did what? You'd met.
I met with the applicant.
Okay. And Alex?
I did as well.
I did not.
Okay. And I did not, but I did have a phone conversation 2 weeks ago when the environmental impact was in front of us.
I did last week.
I did too.
Thank you. I should have brought that up a lot earlier.
Oh, we all should have.
We all should have, yes.
If you're
Yes.
doing the straw poll, on
Good,
the
good
tower,
recollection.
If you're doing a straw poll on the tower, I'd be interested in hearing where everyone is at. I'm okay with it, and primarily because we have articulated in our design guidelines that it is a desired feature. So
Well, but in the right place, just as you were saying about the.
And that's
the
also
appropriate-
very old design guidelines, and we got lots of negative feedback
I
on
know,
it.
but we can't tell people build these things, and then when they build it, we tell them don't build these things.
Yeah,
So
but that's
we
why
need
we
to
have this
train-
process, right?
But the process is moving at a snail's pace. So, I'm okay with it. I actually think it breaks up that third story, and it can work for me. But let's hear what others.
If it wasn't cramping that Paseo so much, I would be okay with it. It just seems like such a narrow passageway for the tower to exist in that corner. You want a little more width next to it. So maybe there's some reconfiguration.
I'm kind of ambivalent on it. I can go either way. I'm not really a tower person, but it's a little big, but I can see how it breaks that up to some extent, articulates it, but I wouldn't mind if it disappeared.
I prefer it to disappear. I think it's artificially creating a corner that isn't there, and there's no reason for it to be there.
Yeah, I really don't have a strong opinion.
That's good. That's an adequate discussion.
Yeah.
I think it gets in the way, as I said earlier.
All right. So, would anyone care to make a motion to
do we move?
continue,
Do
or
we
do
have
we
to-
move to continue?
What do we do
or what
on
are
this,
you-
John?
yeah.
What do you need?
Well, we have a list of things that you're looking for. Maybe we can go over the list first.
Yes.
What I have starting is you want more information on whether or not initial studies and mitigated negative declarations have been approved or adopted in the past 5 years for projects. That was one bit of information. You need current plans that are up to date. You need a legitimate plan for the parking that's proposed, whatever that parking plan will be.
John?
Or the public benefit.
On plans up to date, that includes the code-required roof height clearly marked.
Yes.
Sorry, just wanted to catch you.
Okay. And then my next one was clarification on the height of the building and the parapets. Story poles, it sounded like some of you wanted to see the story
If
poles.
we can understand what's there in the way that Anita described, where the image is annotated to
or
reflect
rendering.
what's there, or the rendering, then that's fine for me. Though I have to say that I'm familiar with 3D flyovers, and I much prefer having it at eye level at 50 degrees, and I prefer the certification of the story pole. So that's why having it marked on the rendering accurately would help me a lot.
Okay.
Me too. And the public, and I think that's important.
I got the story poles. There was a comment regarding accurate 3D renderings. You wanted more accuracy achieved between the renderings and the 3D model.
It's
Was
the
that
eye
at
level.
It's the eye level and the eye perspective, not wide angle.
Story poles revised. And then there were a number of comments regarding the design of the building. Would you like to see the elevations revised to reflect?
If they're going to change
They're
them.
going to change? Willing to change? That's out there. If they're willing to heed your comments and suggestions, they're more than welcome to bring back revised plans that reflect and address the comments.
High-quality material comment.
And more natural. That's what I heard consistently, was more natural materials.
Yeah.
But we're fine with stucco. Really important, we're fine with stucco.
Oh, there was a question regarding easements, or a comment made regarding easements across adjoining properties. I think the specific comment was regarding the Wells Fargo property, so we wanted to look into that as well. A member of the
Not
public.
recalling that comment. What was that?
That was a question, or maybe it was a comment
It was a
from
member of the public that said they thought there
about
was
whether
an easement
the
across.
whether the Wells Fargo, whether there was an easement there as part of that drive-through area.
Whether there
How
is
does
or
that
not,
affect
to
the-
me.
How does that affect?
You're not,
It's not a
okay.
biggie for me.
That's
Okay.
academic at this point.
Right.
It's dangerous no matter what it is.
Yeah, whether it's an easement or not, it's not painted.
But actually, in the parking plazas are dangerous because there's no
Yeah.
place to walk
That's
in
right.
any of the parking plazas.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think just more clarification in terms of what is the code that we're supposed to be applying to this.
Across the
and-
board.
Yeah, and, whether it's the encroachment into the setback
Yeah,
and
encroachment and setback.
all that stuff.
Well,
And-
particularly relevant to the submittal dates or whatever date we're looking at, what the
Right.
code was, that would be
Right.
helpful. Yeah.
And then for me as well, it was hard for me to tell how it compared in height to the other built for Main Street and the hotel. And so if we could show those buildings and what the height is and how it's being measured, just so you can get an overall sense for
visual clarity.
visual clarity. Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope
Okay.
with Bobby, you help me with
Yeah.
visual clarity.
Listen.
We're a team.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, so just to follow up on the list, John and I had sort of compared notes, so we had the same list going on. And the only comment I would add is with regard to the story polls, we had talked about that earlier and whether or not to go forward tonight. And what I said at the time was we would be guided by our past practices, but also policies. So that is something we'll look at the policy and bring back the actual language so we know if there are alternative mechanisms by which that can be met, just so that's clear to both the commission, the applicant, and the public, if there are indeed alternatives that are set out in that policy.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Done? I think, should I move for adjournment?
Continue.
No.
Oh, continue.
I move.
No, I'm not sure we can.
Wishful thinking.
I'm not sure we can continue unless we're continuing to a date certain. and I
No,
don't
we
think
can
we're doing
continue
that.
to a date uncertain.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
continue to a date uncertain.
Okay.
We just need to make sure that we republish.
They have to be
all
re-
of the
renoted.
Then I'll
notices.
move to continue this to the date established by staff.
Oh, wait, we might have a proposal about
Well,
a date certain.
I'd like to make a couple comments and ask maybe for something that would allow us to only continue to the next meeting. And the
you
reason
wanna
why I
come
would
back
like you to consider that is that the issue of the parking lot as a benefit is a huge item. Because you all said that if you don't accept that as a benefit, then the Paseo is not enough. I would at least like to come back to you at the next meeting with just that documentation, so that the focus of our discussion would be on, based upon the information we provide at the next meeting, would that, satisfy the needs that you have. There's also one other thing, is we can reduce the size of the building if we have to find some balance in there. So I'm just trying to, it would be very helpful for us to understand whether that would be something that you'd accept as an additional community benefit or public benefit as the parking lot. So if we continue just for that discussion alone, that would be huge.
But we actually said that.
Yeah.
But you're going to a date uncertain.
Because we don't know what you're going to give us, and that you're saying you'll provide it.
But now that
And
you've
you're
made a
saying-
commitment.
But you're saying you'll provide it at the next meeting. I don't know if staff can review it adequately for engineering and appropriateness. You need to ask John.
Well, at the moment, I'm only speaking of concept, because
Well, concept came across, I think, pretty much unanimously that the Paseo wasn't enough and parking was a good one to try. Am I accurate in that?
Yes. It wasn't the only one we'd consider, but there would need to be more than.
well, then with that
Yeah.
clarification, and I have comfort if we're going to go through that effort for you, that it's just going to confirm that we can do what we just said we can do tonight, because I've actually already done all the drawings. I already know from taking the overlays of the existing drawings that what's in the graphics that we provided you this evening works, based upon 8.5-foot wide parking space.
Well, and you have to go through staff, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It has to go through engineering.
And we want to see the net differences and all that stuff.
Okay.
If you can do that whenever,
Well,
it's
but-
based on what staff can
But
do.
then Bill brings up another question. So we gave other input.
Yes.
Do we want to see the results of this other input? Or do we want to say, well, we'll wait or not wait? What's cooking?
I'd like to see it all together at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah. Yeah, because
All at once.
Just know as well that your next meeting is on the 6th of July, and I think you have at least two, maybe a third commissioner that won't be present.
Oh, because it's the
It's
holiday.
The holiday week. Staff won't be here on the 6th.
When's the next meeting after that?
The next meeting after that is the 20th of July.
But the question also ties, I think Bill was talking about coming to the next meeting with just a parking detail. But if our preference is to see everything, which to me makes more sense anyway, then is that really feasible for you? So that's
Not in 2 weeks.
right. Well, 2 weeks isn't probably the best timing anyway, based on attendance is going to be
But I think the strong sentiment that we all have is we want to move this thing.
Yeah.
We want to find a solution and we want to move it forward.
And in
As
order to do that, it's more
expeditiously
than
as
just
possible.
the parking. It's the rest of the comments. So
So we still, I think it's still a date uncertain because we gave more, multiple feedback. We want it back as soon as you can. So
Right.
can we do a date uncertain? Because, really, it would make most sense for us to see.
Yeah, you can do the date uncertain. We'll just turn it
It can
around.
still
real
be
quick.
faster they
July
get it to
20th.
John, the
you
faster
know,
we
get
can
that to us.
review and
Yeah.
get it on the
And
agenda.
they can decide whether it makes sense to do it on the July 4th holiday weekend or wait for the next meeting, because hopefully there'll be full commission then.
Yeah, well, doesn't sound like they're going to be able to do everything within that time
Yeah,
period.
well, we'll see. So Anita, go ahead.
So I would like to move that we continue this item to the next,
Date uncertain is the.
to a date uncertain, pardon me. I don't think I have to say anything more.
Don't you say anything more. I'll second that.
All right, is there any further discussion on the motion on the table? No, okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous. So we have 6 in favor of continuing to a date uncertain. We're going to close the public hearing on that and move on to Commissioners' reports and comments, but again, we don't have Mike. Oh, but you have something. Okay.
Well, mine
yes.
is a very silly one because the meeting this last Tuesday was a total consent calendar, none of which were items that affected us. So
Easy.
I got off
You're
easy.
right, off easy.
Wow.
Okay.
Did we get the recuperation of the one that we didn't have, the council before that?
No, because that was Mike.
It was Mike still.
again. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then
Potential future agenda-
potential future agenda items?
Yes.
Yes.
Public benefits.
Public benefits, yes.
Could we please have a sense of what other towns are doing for public benefits? Alex volunteered that he could give us a list. At some point, I heard you say that. I remember you did.
That was in
Perhaps-
a meeting, very late at night.
Perhaps-
You might not have been thinking clearly.
You might not have been, you might
Yeah.
want to withdraw that.
I'm happy to share mine.
But I think he could share it with staff, and it would be an informed
So we'll call
item.
it
I don't know if we're allowed to ask this, but I would love to see that agendized because it's going to come up more and more.
Yes.
So are we talking about future agenda items?
Yes.
I would like to reiterate, looking at parking on Edith and on all the streets between State and Edith, because the more that I've looked at it, even since the last time I mentioned this, the more I see the same cars parked in the same spots for literally a week at a time, because there's no limitation whatsoever. And we're all talking about parking being a problem. And I mean, this is literally, and everything south of Maine to San Antonio, all is 2-hour park. I mean, there's no
Yes.
ability. And so we've got this
Free for all.
free for all
For those limited number of spaces, yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense to have that in the triangle. So I would really, whatever you can do to try to get that
Change that.
change that, so we could actually be proactive in trying to solve some
Which
of the
would be
problems.
That's a good one.
lovely.
That's
Isn't
a
that
good one.
Really, though, part of what's in the parking committee report?
I have no idea. I've never
Yeah,
seen the
it's in
parking committee.
It's discussed in the parking committee
About
report.
time
Yeah, timing.
limitations?
Yeah,
That was
timing.
one of many issues discussed.
Yeah,
The
it's
whole
in there.
subcommittee.
There's a whole thing on that.
discussed.
Yeah, but nothing's ever
But this particular, I think
happened.
what Alex is pointing at
It's
is
a
this
quick and easy-
particular zone might be a quick and easy.
Low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Okay.
Right?
Wasn't
that's
there
a-
also the two spots, right, where the building on First Street, the residents of the building on First Street that most objected to the First Street Green project
right.
were saying that they needed a mirror or they needed to remove
Yes.
two spots in
Spots.
order to make their access safe.
Yeah.
That was all, their whole objection related to that. We should.
Yeah, David was
But
going to look at that.
That should go to staff. That's
That's a
not
staff thing
that's
David was
not
gonna look at.
us. Yeah.
So we just need follow-up on where that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other future agenda items? Okay. So I think then we're. Oh.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just the last one was, just as we're talking about the feedback that we continually get at all of these meetings, was enforcement of landscape
Yes.
screening. And
Yes.
again, I really think that we should try to be proactive on these things, especially when people continue to show up.
Tell us
with
stories.
the
Yeah.
same
And who does that go to? I mean, I know we say staff. Where? Who?
It goes first to our code compliance officer.
As
who
a complaint.
As a complaint, yeah.
But what we're
These
saying
are
is, can we be more proactive?
Probably
Can we have an agenda item
not.
proactively say, instead of waiting for someone to complain, can we set it up so that it's easy? You know, if you cut something down and your neighbor, and the guy complains, you don't put in a 5-gallon plant. You have to move a full tree, and you have a bond posted, so you can't just walk away from it.
We do
whatever it is.
things like that. It just takes
I know.
time.
But I'm not sure we have the process in place. I think that's part of what Phoebe's saying. I'm
Well,
not sure we have a good process in place or instructions for things like, don't just replace it with another 5-gallon, with a 5-gallon tree.
I'm not even talking about being that proactive. I'm just even saying, like, because the people at set, like, they were saying, we have complained and nothing's happened, right? Being proactive was like the next step above that.
I mean, well,
which would be
you're,
even
you're
great,
stating
but
a
I'm just-
fact, and I'm saying one of the things that I really look forward to. come on, is that I think the more we come up with proactive policy, the more we have a proactive approach, the clearer we are, the easier it is for the town to run on so many levels. And we can, in this particular one, since it's such an easy thing, people are so unhappy about it, it would be so nice to come up with a policy where you could say, you don't have landscape planting and you're supposed to, go talk to in the office, there's a fund, you will have our arborists tell you what to put, we have it, it's done.
It would be really easy if everyone who we got in contact with agreed and said they will do what we've asked of them.
The
issue is there's a thing called due process.
Oh,
people have to be encouraged sometimes. It goes beyond just a staff contact.
Yeah.
And those, unfortunately, take up a lot of time.
Yeah. Well,
If we had more
alas.
staff, maybe we could.
If I ruled the world, guys.
Yeah, all right, okay. All right, so
All right.
I think on that, we're ready to adjourn. All right, adjourn, done. Thank you, everybody.